listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is James Payne, and this is going to be a fun one. We've got Mo on the controls. He's pushing the big red button. Mm-hmm. We've got Chris in here to help us out with this conversation, and we're going to be talking about something else you can do to put meat in your freezer, quite a bit of meat in your freezer if you do well at it, which is pulling some salmon out of the rivers up here. So we've got a lot of options available to us, both, you know, from people here in the interior, all the people down in Anchorage that listen, and down in the southern part of the state. There are a lot of options for salmon, and it is something that comes alive towards the end of bear season, or bear baiting season, I should say, for, you know, most of the state. Black bear stays open pretty much year-round for a lot of it. But the baiting season does end at the end of June, so it's in full swing now, but there are other ways to put meat in the freezer we're going to talk about today. I'm excited for that. If I sound a little off in this episode, a little nasally, I do apologize. It's the season for bears, and it's the season for allergies, and they have been kicking my butt like the last week.
I'll see if I can fix it in post.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, see if you can put a non-allergy filter on the on the podcast, which is weird, you know. So I've been up here, you know, since 2009. I've taken a couple of trips to the lesser 48, but ultimately I've been up here majority of my adult life, and there are only 2 springs that I can remember ever having allergies. One was like 3 years ago, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I had super bad allergies for some reason. And then this year, other than that, like even last year, never had a single bout of allergies once. And for some reason, I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe I was coming down with a bug. Like, it's just so weird for me to have those. But I looked out I was trying to fill up some water jugs the other day, and I noticed they had all the pollen on them, right? And I just went to clang them together to knock that off before going to fill up the water jugs, and like instantly, and like scratchy throat. Like the last 2 days, I've just been like nasal, you know, just hacking and coughing, and just it's
crazy.
Ooh. So for anybody that deals with this every single year, I feel so sorry for you.
Welcome to the club.
Dude. I have a whole new level of sympathy for people that are like, oh, yeah, springtime, I'm having to start taking my meds. I'm like, I never understood, dude. Like, I never understood how bad it can be.
Yeah,
like,
I don't wish it on my worst enemy. Dude, it's been better this year too.
Has it?
Yeah, I've done really good this year.
Well, it seems like for how early of a spring we had, the pollen seems to be here a little late, honestly. Like, I mean, everything's already in full bloom. Like, I
mean, it's like anything. It's while some things are early, some things are late. Like, cycles stay pretty close to the same. It just,
right.
You know, a little early. Well, when you think about it, it's not really an early melt off. It's not really an early spring. It's just early for the last few years.
Yeah. We just kind of had like a half melt off in February, half melt off in April.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a pretty good time though.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, for some reason, like last night, dude, it was so bad. I would like fall asleep and then like wake up coughing and then just not be able to stop coughing, and then
crazy.
Finally get back to sleep. It was just,
no,
I gotta find a medicine that works, because this isn't working out for me. I'm not winning.
Here's a tip for being somebody who's never dealt with allergies and lived here my entire life, so I don't have any room to talk about experiencing that. At least never dealt with allergies like that. I've had some weird stuff that may have been some kind of allergy, but nothing that has affected me to coughing or scratchy throat to that extent anyway. But growing up, my dad did, and he still does, bees.
Oh yeah.
And if you can get yourself some local raw honey
made
from well, just local raw honey, anyway, you know, even sometimes you can get it from out of state or whatever.
If you're here in Fairbanks, they've got that what's that, roaming root down there on College Road. I think she's got a lot of like raw. I think she sells raw honey there, but it's all local, like Fairbanks farmers and stuff like that.
My dad would he would give a jar of it to a friend who, like, he had a friend who couldn't cut the grass. Literally could not cut the grass. He'd go outside to cut after, like, his wife cut the grass, and his whole face would just like swell up and he couldn't breathe. And my dad gave him a jar of honey and said, "Here, try this."
Yeah.
They say you could go out it completely removed the allergies. And that's not just springtime allergies, right?
Microdosing, like the pollens and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's
right?
something that, honey's just bee spit.
Yeah, right.
So there's something that their bodies do to, because they use pollen, right, to make the honey, and there's something they get everything local from that area.
I'm sure
into the honey, and
either one of our wives are going to hear this part of the podcast and be like, "This is why it does it, and this is why."
There's a good chance, but it helps. It helps people tremendously, and it is an all natural.
That's true.
Remedy.
Whatever it is, however it does it, it works. Yeah. And I've heard that before, like the natural raw local honey. That's the thing, is like you don't want to go get raw honey from like the Fred Meyers that was made down.
That's not raw honey.
One, it's not raw, but two, it's like it's not the plants that you're dealing with in your area. So
you can add up to 40% corn syrup approved by the FDA and still call it raw honey.
What?
Yep.
Dude.
So don't go buy it from Fred Meyers or Walmart or any of those places. You got to buy local.
I did not know that.
Yep.
That's craziness. Yep. Get it from somebody local. I know that, like, even a guy I work with at work, he's got bees.
Yeah. Now there may be a little distinction between
raw
honey and pure honey and designations, but it's not truly raw when you buy it. When you buy it commercially.
Yeah. Well,
buy it local.
Yeah, and any kind of pasteurization process that's done to anything, it just kills off all that good stuff.
All that is done in harvest, a good local harvest, is just enough heat to make the honey run, right? And then it's put through a strainer.
Yeah,
that's it.
I would love to have bees someday. I've never even been around beehives, but I would love to do that someday when I have property, like enough property to keep them away from the house, so I'm not worried about them. But
they don't need to be very far.
No, I just don't want to have to worry about them when I'm like outside on the porch barbecuing or something like that. But I've heard I don't know. I've heard they got like 2 miles of range that they can go in. So
they go a long way. They go a long way, and really, it's more. You just don't walk in front of the hive,
right,
and stand there, right. Like then that's when they get aggressive. And it's when you do that, you can try to winter bees up here, but my dad has wintered bees all the way through the winter, only for them to die off in the.
I would say everybody I know that has bees up here, they just get all new ones in the spring.
It's so much easier, so much less work. It's not worth keeping them through. But so you can pick your strain of bees and what kind of bees. Like you can get African bees and from all over the world. What you want until you finally find the ones you like. Right.
Nice.
So
that's pretty cool.
Where do you acquire bees here?
That is a good question.
I think my buddy just orders them online. Like there's
you might be able to order them online.
Yeah, he just gets them shipped here. Like, and the only reason I know that is because he was like, "Oh, I gotta go." It was like 30 minutes early from the day or something like that. And he's like, "Oh, I got to make it to the post office. My bees showed up or something like." It's
crazy.
Like,
my dad
that's cool.
Has always gone through a guy who will actually order them from from a bee farm in the lower or an apiary, right? And they'll come up on a truck. Right. And then there's just like a set time. You can just go meet and pick up your bees. Yeah. Like so all completely local. Right. And I don't know, maybe you can order them online now. I don't think he does it that way. You didn't used to be able to. Right.
Yeah.
But I think he even built all his own beehives and like ordered frame kits. And
I've heard the hardest part is getting your queen established. Like once you get the queen established, it's all good from there.
But it's like queen established.
I've heard that's like the most I'm not going to say hard part, but like the most delicate part of the process.
Yeah, it can be. It's pretty simple to do.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. I'd be all about it. But,
and if my dad, I think will actually usually buy an extra queen or two, which just comes in a separate little cage, and that way, if they do reject the first queen, he can give them another one.
Just one hobby after the next, just racking them up. Just gonna have to quit our day jobs before long.
Here's hoping, right?
Right. Yeah.
Man, I mean, if I do enough of this stuff, I won't have to earn a living.
Some free information you probably weren't expecting to get on today's podcast.
Right. Exactly. But no, I know the other year that I had really bad allergies, man, it was like I was sitting in the bear stand and just, oh, dude, I'm just, trying to like not let out a full blown cough.
Oh, yeah.
And then you hold that in for a good 15, 20 minutes and it's just hurting. And then you finally got to like just bury your face in every coat you own.
And then it's just a really good cough.
A really good one. And then you're good for like another 15, 20 minutes. And then it's like, got to get like a suppressor on your face kind of thing.
Get start all over again with quiet time.
And I that year I found a medication that worked really good. It was just a gas station one, but I forget what brand it was. I don't know if it was Claritin or which one it was, but It was one of the weird ones actually. So
I can't remember what I got on deck, but it's good. The only thing is it gets you all jittery, then it gets you all tired. I hate taking that stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Doesn't marry well with my Red Bull.
Well, that's what you get for double dosing there, good buddy.
Hopefully my wife doesn't listen to this.
For a while, this time of year, and this year I've not been doing it. I've been better and better about it with bear baiting and everything. But like you get into bear baiting season, and then you always say, okay, well after bear baiting season I'll get sleep. And yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I was hitting a couple Red Bulls a day, 2-3 Red Bulls a day, like last year this time, 2-3 Red Bulls a day, and like my first Red Bull of the morning. I was not every morning. I was trying to regulate myself, but it was like a couple of Advil. Like this is the kicker right here. Headache goes away. Like I wake up and let's go. And like I said, I would like do that every few days so as not to get too much of that stuff in your system. It'll kill your kidneys. But
I was gonna say our wall of Red Bull has
slowed down
quite a bit. It's been looking the same the last couple of weeks.
Tell you the truth, I've been going a little more hardcore.
We're getting that real stuff. No,
the Red Bull doesn't have a ton of caffeine in it.
I was surprised. So I've got these like stay awake pills that I can get at the Walmarts or something like that. I think these have like 200 milligrams of caffeine each.
Yeah, well, Red Bull's got like 80. It's not a lot, or 160 or whatever.
I was looking at. I was just this morning, or not this morning, but earlier before the show, I was looking at those Red Bulls because I was like, man, I'm so drowsy. I got like an hour of sleep last night between.
Tell us how old you are without telling us how old you are.
Stay awake pills.
That's literally what they're called. It says "stay awake" on the thing. But I was looking. I think those ones are like 112 or something like that. Yeah, for a 12 ounce can.
Yeah, I think the 8-ounce cans have like a 80
or 90. Yeah, I was surprised. I was like, man, I've been taking another one of these pills.
There's newer one that's come out. I think this last one are called Bucked Up.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah, they got them over there in the store.
Yeah, I like those a lot.
Yeah,
they're not super sweet like the Bangs and the Reigns and all that stuff.
Yeah, you got to. So when I was in the military, I was real heavy on those like the blue and the green monsters, and I just can't. Like the white monsters are okay because they're not as syrupy. Mm-hmm. The Reigns, I do like a Reign. I don't really drink. I try not to drink energy drinks anymore. They're real bad for you. Especially when you drink as many as I do, or did, I should say. Dude, I was up to like 3 Reigns a day at one point. Like, good night. That's like 900 milligrams of caffeine. It's insane. It's like, your heart's a muscle, train it to failure.
So I used to work with a guy that was drinking 3 Monster 300s a day.
Whew. Yeah.
3 to 4.
Yeah. That's each of those Reigns is 300.
He started having, he wasn't sleeping enough any night of the week. I'm not sure what was going on, like home life, but and he would just have episodes of like, they'd find him laying next to his truck. Like walked out to his truck and passed out. Like,
oh man,
that's
not good.
He's since moved out of his parents' house and a few things, and like he is like super chill now. He'll drink like a cup of coffee in the morning and that's it.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't touch energy drinks anymore. He goes, I can't handle it.
Yeah. So that's one thing I found out. So I've been on this reset procedure for my gut biomes, right? Like it's a bunch of complicated stuff I don't understand, but I do what I'm told, right? So these are my symptoms. People told me what to do. I'm doing it. So, but part of that is I've basically been on the carnivore diet for like the last 4 weeks.
Okay.
Modified. Like I can have fruits and stuff like that, and like I eat oatmeal because it's like
for the most part just like unprocessed.
Yeah, whole unprocessed. Yeah. Which is part of why I quit the energy drinks, right? Is because like, okay, I can have a cup of coffee in the morning, but like I'm not supposed to have anything that's got like, the artificial sugars and stuff. And I'm taking like these crazy antibiotics that like I'm doing what's called the kill off process, or the die off process. Like it's like I'm like nuking everything, and then like I'm gonna rebuild for the next 2 months or whatever complicated process it is, right?
You can stick to it.
But so far,
well, good for you. Good for you. Yeah.
But after the first week and a half, like 10 days, I'd say, like same thing, 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and I'm just coasting. But when I was having like energy drinks, it would be 1 as soon as I wake up, like on the way to work, like chugging 1 with lunch, 1 towards the end of the day, just to get me through and coast me through the evening, so I could go home and actually be productive and do stuff. And now it's like, because I'm eating mostly like eggs and meat and stuff like that, and it's like I'm just coasting. the whole day. And
you probably feel so much
it's
better.
weird. It was really weird that first like 10 days, but after that, it's been super nice.
I'm to a point now where I usually don't drink it on the weekends, unless I'm like driving forever and hunting a lot, and then inevitably that's what keeps me going. Yeah. But if I'm not doing that, I'm not hitting them on the weekends, and then during the week, usually don't need one on Monday because hopefully I caught up on sleep on the weekend. Hopefully, not always this time of year. But then Tuesday, Wednesday, once I like really get that first working, and you just hit that wall of I'm tired, I can't think.
Yeah.
And I don't drink it until that hits, right? And then I keep it out. I only drink one.
That's a good way to do it.
And then when it gets to that point where they start not working so much for me, I stop.
That's what I noticed was that those energy drinks, like after a little while, you just get that tolerance built up almost, and then
and I stop using them until until after a while, it's like, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Or
it's April 15th. I'm gonna
right.
sucking these down.
Well, and I mean, and maybe it's the fact that it's a what do they call that, a stimulant, and it's almost like people that use nicotine products.
Yep.
Like you use them long enough, you don't realize the difference, right? Like you put a dip in or something
start
like that.
Start with a 3.
Start with a 3, move to a 6.
A couple weeks later, you're on a 6. A couple weeks later,
but like you don't realize
6s.
it's there. Like you don't realize like what it's doing to you until you get off of it, and then like maybe you throw another dip in like weeks later, and you're like, oh, that's what that feels like. But it's just normalizing you when you get used to it. It's probably the same thing with caffeine. I mean, it's all ends with an ene, so it's probably related. But
was it you? I think you threw me a pouch a while back, like over winter or something, or was that you? I can't remember. I was like, give me one of those things. And I started getting the spins. I was like, oh yeah.
That might have been one of those times we were out calling or something.
I can't remember.
I don't know.
You're like, oh, you'll be fine. I think it was you and I think, dude. Yeah. But I was like, yeah, give me one of those things. I was like, had my Red Bull. I started getting the whips. Sound like a helicopter taking off. I was like, crazy. Okay, time to spit this out.
It's crazy.
Like, instantly, like 60 seconds.
Yeah, when it's been a minute, man, it's crazy. Ooh. But yeah, just same thing with energy drinks. It's like, it's just bringing you back to normal. It's not even like getting you past anything.
Right, you learn to function. It's just in any chemical that your body gets used to, or substance, really.
That's what I like about like just having a coffee in the morning and just grooving
coffee in the morning
the rest
nice.
of the day.
Yeah.
It's like you're good. And I've heard certain doctors say like you're actually not supposed to drink coffee in the morning because it like messes up something in your body, natural production.
Well, there's also doctors that say you should, so I believe those.
Your ideal time to drink coffee is like afternoon or something like that, but it's that's way too late for me.
Yeah.
I'm on a full-blown night schedule right now.
Are you?
Yeah. I mean, like I'm going to bed at like 5:30 in the morning consistently and sleeping amazing. And like, yeah. So like yesterday I got up, had a cup of coffee, had breakfast at like 1. And like, and then I went up, we attempted to record and had to pick up.
Right.
But I like went up to the bait. It was so crazy. I took off to the bait like right after that whole thing happened. I was like, all right, I'm going to go run to the bait. And I'm like, shoot, I didn't grab any caffeine. And then I drank water the whole time. And I got home at like 4 a.m. and I felt so good. And then my sleep was so good.
Right.
And I was like, man, that's just a testament to like how bad this stuff is for you.
Well,
I slept really good. I think I slept like 6.5 hours.
Yeah.
Sprung out of bed.
Yeah.
And I felt good. And I was like, man, and you just sleep. You're restless when you have all that caffeine.
Well, and that's like, so once I was like in my unit and everything with the Army, like you're allowed to do whatever you want. But when I was in training, like that's exactly what they would have you do. Like if you were tired, like especially once I got to AIT, where you're not in basic anymore, so you're not, but you are still training. Like if you're sitting there doing your classes and you're feeling tired, like you don't have Red Bulls and stuff like this available to you all the time, right? At least not when I was in. You probably do now, but that's what we would do. It was like if you're feeling tired, you just chug as much water as you can. Like just chug. It'll wake you up. And then if that doesn't work, do push-ups. And that combination will wake you up.
Get your blood flowing.
Like get your blood flowing, get your body awake, and then your mind will follow. And
I've had it too. You guys have probably had this where you get to the bait, and if you're rocking stuff in on foot, you're dead, and you rock that stuff in, have a bottle of water, and you're just wide awake.
Yeah.
Like you just got everything moving.
Yeah.
And usually that's like a 5-hour buzz for me.
Yeah.
For me, that's that kind of thing till I sit down. Like if I'm maybe not drinking energy drinks at all, right? I go work. I work 10-hour shifts. I go to work. I work my 10 hours or 12 hours or whatever it turns out to be. Usually it's around 10, but There's days. And I feel great. I'm driving home. I feel great. I get home. I'm walking around outside the house, getting stuff done. I think, all right, I'm going to go eat dinner. I go inside, I eat dinner. And then it's just,
Yep.
it's like, yeah, no, I'm not getting anything else done tonight.
My wife started pointing that out. And she's like, if it's not done before dinner, it's just not good.
Like, okay.
Hey,
I will.
You know what? It's okay.
I will push through stuff if it's early enough. A lot of times I don't eat dinner till later.
That's how we are. Yeah, we're like a 9 p.m. dinner family.
But if sometimes it's just you walk inside and sit down on the couch for a minute to play with the kids, and then it's like, oh, well, now I feel like going to sleep.
Right. That's where like these pills or like a little pick-me-up drink is nice, is that last little bit. But
right. Well, I don't take that at the end of the day. I try to keep it midday just because I can drink a Red Bull and fall asleep.
It's not the best.
You don't get great sleep, just like Chris was saying.
Yeah. So, kind of along those lines of the time of year and everything like that, you guys both talked about your bears last week. You've been out to the baits since then.
Well, yeah.
Is that that's of course I have.
Exactly.
How's that going?
I mean, I still got bears on the bait. Just I didn't see anything big on the camera. I baited up real good, sent it up good. Gonna go check it again here in a day or two and maybe hunt it and we'll see what it looks like. But ran out just in the weekly bear baiting tails. I ran out to scout out an area. Chris was going to go with me, but he couldn't make it with the work or something. He didn't miss anything.
My time management's not going the best this season. No, not by any means.
That's all right.
And it definitely some unforeseen.
Mine either, buddy.
That happens. It's okay. Yeah.
Mine has been an absolute cluster, but that's a story for another time.
This is a wheeler spot, right? This trail. I was like, all right, I know this trail's here. I've heard it's bad. Should mean nobody else is there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ride it. Hopefully the first part's what's bad and it gets better. Because a lot of times that's, especially on a long trail, right? I get on maps and look, it's like, it goes way back in here. Like, I'm going to go ride. And
yep.
He couldn't make it. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to go see if I can not kill myself and do this. And I ride in there. Of course, I got the new Can-Am, which just makes life so nice. It's so much nicer. Those new tires, it just rips right. Like none of the mud. Mm-hmm. Like my dad was in there with a wheeler the other day and he's like, yeah, I got stuck in this one spot and this and that. And like, I squirted right through everything. It was like, nice. But, and he's got a decent setup on a wheeler. He's, a Grizzly with some nice tires on it. But anyway.
Those Grizzlies are nice wheelers.
Rip right through the mud and everything in the first mile or two where it was like muddy and like lots of water. And that's the biggest part I was concerned about. Get up and like next thing I know, like less than a mile and I'm above the tree line.
Mm.
And I can see it's blue sky, sunny day. I can see 360 degrees almost like just every direction. And I can see a truck like coming down a hill miles away. And you don't hear like the air brakes or anything. It's like, this is like weird. It's silent. And so, this is awesome. I'm going to keep riding this, and like see what this looks like. So I ride back in there a ways. And I ended up going like 5-6 miles in. It was rough as could be. Really rough. But I'm like, I'm never going to ride this trail again. I'm going to see where it goes. Just see what it looks like. Why not? You go back into the trees and come out of the trees again. And I get up like probably 4 miles in and I turn around and it's just black in the sky behind me.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Lightning. I like wheelers shut off. I hear thunder. Like, oh, well, that's coming towards me from the direction I came from. So I'm not turning around now.
Yeah.
I kept riding. And I'm up on top, I'm up way up above tree line now. Right. So I just kept riding.
You're about to get some.
I'm thinking like, well, my thought process was I'm miles away from that right now. Mm-hmm. Hopefully by the time it gets to me, it's not moving fast. It'll have worn out.
Dissipated a little bit.
A bit, yeah.
Right.
And I get to a point where I'm up on a knob again. And I look and it's like, all right, it's going to start raining soon. So I start heading down towards kind of a low spot where there was a tree. Mm-hmm. Like 3 trees, And like, well, I don't want to leave this steel wheeler up on top of for a brand new steel wheeler, all these electronics on it up on top of everything. So I rolled down. As soon as I get down to the bottom, it starts hitting like big drops right away. So rain gear out, suit all up, and and then by the time I suit up, it's just hitting hard. Next thing I know, it's hailing. Like I just left the wheeler, grabbed some snacks, tucked the electric chainsaw under the wheeler, and just walked down the away from the wind down the hill and just like squatted over there.
Yep.
And ate snacks out of my little chest rig I had on, just sitting there leaning over eating snacks like, oh, this sucks. And it's like 15 minutes of hail, like big hail.
Yeah.
And rain and and it started to dissipate. So I turned around. By the time I got back to the wheeler, it slowed down. And of course, now everything's wet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cold. It was not a fun ride out. I rode a little further, just was like, all right, well, I'm going to go up to the next hill just because you got to ride one more hill. Right? One more cast. And I got up there and it was like a beautiful valley. We were like, this would be an awesome spot to bait, but there is no way I'm going to ride like 3 hours on a wheeler through that. It's like
every time.
I've heard my dad call like really rough trails. Like it's like you're riding over basketballs. Mm-hmm. This is like you're riding over exercise balls. Like just not all of it, right? But it just had its moments. And so,
right.
So I turned around and it was, felt like, of course, I got to ride back through some of the rain to get out. And anyway,
not worth it, huh?
Not worth it. That's why I texted you. Like,
you
didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
You would have just been following me going, why are we still going?
Oh, no. I wouldn't have followed you.
Was that you wouldn't have?
Right, no. I'm like, this dude's crazy.
I would have been like, what are we doing here, Mo?
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's a spot a couple miles in. I was like, this would be a good spot, but I just don't even know if the first couple miles is worth the effort. Right. Maybe next year. I got a good bait right now. Maybe
get
next
in
year.
early enough, yeah.
If I can get somebody crazy enough to follow me in and see what it looks like. And I mean, the trail's not bad. I don't think like risk of getting stuck isn't like that. Like it's just slow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, and there's been some crazy storms this spring already. I mean, I was down on the east side of the state for work. We were doing like Mentasta, Tetlin, all those areas down there. And I remember looking up one time, we were driving out. I just looked up and it was literally a black sky. I mean, horizon to horizon. It was like, almost like that doesn't look natural. That doesn't look right.
I know this is good for us, but it feels so wrong.
I know. Like, that's going to suck. And we drove right into it. And it was like, it did suck. But no, that's it. I mean, that's the time of year it is, man. Yeah. Springtime or early summer, I should say. We're way past spring, but it's early summer.
The other thing was like I'm sitting there, right? And when you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's amazing how loud the silence is, right? The birds and whatnot. And there's not really a lot of birds up there, but all I can hear, it's just like rolling thunder. It's like rolling thunder, it crash. A few seconds of silence and more rolling thunder, almost constant, like this whole time. And I'm just like, flashing. I'm like, is this? I know the chances of being struck by lightning are really, really low, but mine are a lot higher than normal right now.
Right? Yeah. You're that guy.
Up on top of the mountain. Like I did walk down the side. There's higher trees up behind me. The wheeler's back there. I don't want to lose it, but I'd rather it be struck.
There's a point where you have to start considering where people become statistics. Like,
right.
I am that 1 in a million. Yeah.
I'm that guy where people get that information.
Right.
Well, that sounds like an adventure. What about you, Chris? Your bait's doing pretty good.
Kind of same old. Like I haven't really had the time to get in, which has been. I'm glad it's panned out how it has. It's been a really odd season for me. Just as far as it's been I've had a very blessed season, but it seems like every time I'm getting out, I'm just trying to like butter stuff up and make sure things aren't running low. And I got some bears, but I'm not timing them. I'm not timing them right. And I have always had evening bears. All my bears are like 1 a.m. bears right now, 7 a.m. bears, and it's just
bears that are
not
noon.
working into my schedule.
Noon bears right now.
I usually have like the beginning of the season, like some of these baits that they'll start like early morning, like midnight and on. And then as the season progresses, you start getting those like evening hits, like 8, 7, 6. Like it's always, but for some reason, I'm not getting into those time frames, and so I'm not getting into bears because I'm not having the luxury to sit those hours.
Right.
But I think if I get skunked the rest of the way through, I've done well. So I'm not going to complain about it. I got a bunch of meat.
It's been a really weird season for me too. Honestly, I mean, I've got baits out in the woods right now, but I haven't really like had as much time as I had intended to, due to just things that have just been, it's like priority take to priority take to priority take. And it's like, you keep trying to push all that stuff off to be able to be like, oh, well, I need to get out. And, especially when you're not, heading right into your own backyard when you go wherever you're going. Right. And it's like, takes time and effort, and it's just, it's been rough. I'm going to hit it hard this weekend. And see what I can make happen, and finish doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm hoping this season picks up for me.
And there's a lot of guys pulling bears too.
It's been a rough one for me this year, but not as rough as last year. So I'm thankful for that. Last year was the year of heartbreak. This has not been a year of heartbreak thus far. So it's just been time consuming. But that's real life.
I think you're gonna connect. I think you guys put a good game plan together. I think you need to keep your head high for the time being.
Yeah,
I have a good feeling about your success there.
Head's definitely not hanging low. I'm just no. That's there's hunt's not over till it's over. That's the way it always goes.
I went and did the. I was in the taxidermist this morning, talking to my taxidermist, and dude, it was. You could barely walk through there. There were so many black bears.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're dropping like flies right now.
And he's like, "Man, I haven't seen this many black bears in a long time." And he's like, "I started getting them in April."
Mm-hmm.
So I mean. And I was like, I don't think you're done. I don't think this is going to slow down because we're not even in the prime yet. You still got 3 more weeks of this. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Dude, he was fleshing stuff and he had stuff hanging. I was like, yeah, I think you're in for it.
Yeah, this knife sharpener is going to get a workout. but that's good. Yeah, hopefully we'll have some more updates coming forward. But yeah, let's take a break real quick and then we'll dive into fish. Hammer Bullets produces what we at the Northern Hunter consider to be the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are easy to load, extremely accurate, and best of all, they're always in stock and ready to ship. The guys at Hammer designed them so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, it sheds its petals, initiating a massive energy dump while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration. These bullets are built with 100% focus on how they perform on game, and their proprietary designs produce great BCs with specialized pressure grooves for amazing inherent accuracy and speed. They have a minimum expansion velocity of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots, but with no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity round like the Weatherby 30-378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com and use discount code TheNorthernHunter to drop the hammer on your next adventure. All right, so hopefully we'll have some good updates on the bait soon. But until then, let's talk about some salmon. Let's see. There's a lot of different options for people to go to all over the state, really. I mean, there's spots all along the Kenai Peninsula. There's spots, where people can go. The most common one for our neck of the woods, though, is arguably, I would say, the Copper River. That's probably the one most people in Fairbanks go to, and that's the one we'll focus on since that's where a lot of the experience comes from. Mm-hmm. There's a really cool some other options we'll talk about later in the show, but for dip netting purposes, that's kind of the focus on this one is net and fish, I should say. That's I would say probably the way to get the most salmon in maybe a short amount of time, depending on the year.
Depending on the year.
I know last year people were saying they were limiting out in like 2 hours.
Depends on the day.
Depending on the
run at the time you're there.
How it's running at the time, what the water levels are like. Because that's what screwed me last year. Man, the water levels
forever changing.
Fluctuating like crazy. Just the day before when the water's low or, the time of day, if you get out there right, I mean, you can really hammer them. Now, I would like to say I have, a lot of experience on that, but I really can't say that about myself. I have a lot of research, but you, Chris, are what they call a netting fool. So
I got a lot of fights, very few trophies.
Hey, it's all about getting in the ring, right?
That's, I guess.
So let's talk kind of more specifically about like the Copper River area. There's 2 types of permits you can get to fish in that area, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Why don't you dive into that one a little bit? What are the 2 different ones, and what's the difference between them as far as like limits and requirements and whatnot for each one?
So I'm not going to get too much into the legal stuff because that's something that you should constantly be checking up on, right? And just kind of for our own preservation here at the show, we're not
and it's always changing is the other thing.
It is.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be misleading with anything. So you have the personal use permit, which is below the bridge.
Mhm.
And that's the McCarthy Bridge. What's that? I can't remember what the name of that road's called.
I have no idea.
Going in there.
The road to McCarthy.
Yeah, there's a name.
I've never been there.
I've been on it, but I can't. I think it's just.
Here we are.
Anyhow,
I'll find out for
it's
you real quick.
sort of fun fact, really irrelevant to what we're talking about. But so you've got the personal use, and that's the you got, what do we got here? 25 salmon per head of household, plus 10 fish for each additional household member.
Mm-hmm.
1 king salmon per permit, tag not required, because that does apply as your
Do you need
stamp. You don't need a
you,
stamp.
you don't need a king salmon stamp for that?
You do not,
Okay.
because that applies to your personal use limit.
Okay.
And then you've got the subsistence permit. By the way, that permit's costs money. It's $15, right?
Mhm.
The personal use, that's below the bridge. The subsistence permit, and these are both open to residents only. These are not a non-resident
Right.
opportunity.
Gotcha. Yep.
So your bag limit on the subsistence is up to 200 fish for individual permits, up to 500 fish per household.
Okay.
Up to 5 king salmon per permit if taken by DipNet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um,
And I'm sure that kind of goes along with the like how many people are in your household and everything like that, and they'll gauge, with the subsistence permit.
Yeah, and
how
so
many you get.
And so with your permits, I'm not sure if it's like this on the personal use permit, but on the subsistence, I know I have to name every household member.
Okay. Yeah.
So like even my 4-year-old, his name's got to go on that permit.
Mhm.
They're
Right.
very adamant about who's on there, right?
Right. Well, and I know that you do get a difference in bag limit with the personal use too. 25 per head of household, and then 10 for every additional dependent you have. So, like for me and my wife, we can go get 35 fish. If you have 2 kids, that's 55 fish, right?
Mhm.
Like, but I don't know if you need to have their name specifically. It would make sense if you did, but or if you just kind of claim it when you get your permit. I'm not sure how that works, but that's again something to look into.
Yeah,
and make
and-
sure you're legal.
And I always get the subsistence permit
Mhm.
because I like to be away from the crowds. It's a little bit different style of fishing.
Mm.
It's kind of a little more adventurous because it's your road access to the above bridge opportunity is much less, right?
True, yeah,
And-
because the road kind of deviates.
Yeah, and we can kind of get into how you can access that and through what means, but you don't really have your access is very limited on the
Yeah.
above bridge permit, and I think that's kind of why a lot of people refrain from going that route,
Mhm.
just because of ease of access and things like that, and
Yeah, well, and a lot of people, I mean, when you go to that bridge, it is swarmed with people when the water levels are right.
yeah,
It is combat fishing. I mean, really, it is. It's shoulder to shoulder with people. And I mean, and then you'll go there other times, especially if the water's high and odds aren't that great, and there'll be 1 or 2 people there, right?
Mhm.
But there is a lot of people that go down to this area. You're especially with the personal use, you're not going to be alone. Don't expect to go down there and have this tranquil, calm. Dip netting is not that kind of fishing.
just another element of combat fishing, really, just a little more gentle.
Yeah. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of chaos, but it's cool.
Yeah.
So that road that you're talking about, it changes names at the bridge. So it's the Edgerton Road leading up to that bridge, and then it is literally the McCarthy Road afterwards.
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
But it's a big bridge.
That's actually
that's
the Edgerton Highway too, coming into Chittenango.
right.
So
Yeah, that's 50 miles
Right.
or something like that.
Right.
40, 50 miles, something.
Yep.
But that's a cool drive. I mean, if for nothing else, that's just a beautiful area of the state. I mean, honestly.
I will mention, and it can kind of be a bummer for some people. So once you kind of select the permit that you want to operate under, you are limited to that permit. You're committed.
You can't switch
So
back
you
and forth.
can't switch back and forth.
Yeah.
And so that's just something to consider. I know people have gotten one. Above bridge can be difficult fishing. Next to access, it does seem that the water levels, whatever's happening with the water levels, seem to manipulate that area of the river more.
Gotcha.
It seems to be much more sensitive to those changes. And so, whereas those fish, you can kind of figure out where they're hanging on the lower section, like in the canyon.
Right.
And even when it's rough, you can access some of that like slack water and some of those little back eddies and target them, and you can find them. When you get above, your fishable water is much more limited too.
Right.
So, and it's kind of hard to explain, but it's much more sensitive to those changes.
Well, and even just looking at it on the map, I mean, it looks like it widens out a lot.
It does. There. So those fish have a lot more opportunity to sort of congregate towards the center of the river.
Right.
And different things like that. So when the water levels rise, and a lot of that's all glacial fed. So a good way to determine is like rainfall and warmth will dictate water levels. Right. I enjoy going like in August, and because you start getting those kind of cooler evenings, you start getting some of those cooler evenings again, so that melt off kind of subsides.
Yep.
So you start getting more stable water levels, and you can kind of gauge your game plan. You can dial your game plan in a little better.
Well, and that's one thing I can vouch for, because last year I went down there in, I want to say early July. It wasn't the 4th of July, but I think it was the weekend after that. And we got down there, and I was down there kind of for a halfway work trip, halfway fishing trip, and got done with all of our work and went down to the bridge and checked things out, and went out some other places and walked down some trails and just looking at water levels and access and all this different stuff. And I had a below the bridge permit, so I was looking just in that kind of concentrated area. And in the evening, I mean, it was probably 10 o'clock at night at this point, and it was cool. And then the water levels were low, and I'm like, oh, dude, this is it. This is, and like the weeks prior, everybody's telling me when they hit it right, and especially if they had a boat, they were able to hit it out of the boat. They were like, oh, dude, we limited it out in like an hour and a half. We limited it out in 2 hours. And I'm like, dude,
drifting.
I know we're shore fishing. We're not going to be quite that good, but like it's going to be, this is it. Like the water levels look good. We woke up the next morning and went out there, and it was just a hot morning. And it was dramatic, the difference between like 10, 11 o'clock at night to like even 6, 7 the next morning.
Yeah.
I mean, like we should have been up at like 4.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And that's a great time to fish too.
Yeah.
The times you want to sleep, it's almost like bear baiting, right? The times you want to sleep are not the good times to be sleeping.
Right.
That's when you want to be. I mean, and we will push it. Like we'll have like headlamps on and stuff in August. We got like our headlamps on, and we're out there like we're pushing it. It's getting pretty dark and kind of right to the end there, but and we you kind of, to speak to what you just mentioned, we had one year we had gone to sleep, because we'll stay out when we get the subsistence permit. We'll actually sleep out on the river, and that's it. The experience just kind of seems to be a little different overall. You do get away from people.
Sure. Yeah.
You get an opportunity to camp, to kind of do your thing.
Feels a little bit more backcountry fishing.
It is. You get dropped off. You get dropped off because generally you're hiring someone to, unless you have like access. Then there again, boat access. It's pretty dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
That's a bad river.
I would not recommend being like having a riverboat and just dumping it in there and thinking you're going to send it. That's not one of those kind of rivers.
It's a good way to get hurt. There's a lot of big rocks in that river too, is the other big thing.
Yeah. And we use an outfit, and they're awesome. They drop us off, and we'll take like the 22s and the rim fires and different stuff. We'll have campfire. We'll grill out. It's a better experience for us anyway. But
that sounds like a blast.
It is a blast. You should get the subsistence permit, James.
I haven't locked down which one I'm doing this year, so that's probably what I'll do.
Well, and the Copper is by no means a kid-friendly place, in my opinion.
Yeah,
that's not a place you take your crew. That's like, we can get into that, but that's not a place where you got kids running around playing. I've seen it, and it's concerning.
Well, one, that river is fast. Like if they misstep, slip into the water, I mean that's a bad deal there. But two, I mean it's rough country.
Yeah, it's not a family area. You're going there to get work done.
Right. Yeah.
But what now contrary to that, and this is not for everyone, depends on how your kids behave and how much verbal control you got over them. But a couple of the areas we go, it's calm enough that you have a pretty good break between like the shoreline and the main current.
Okay. Yeah.
And so in some cases, like I would take my kid out there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't advise that.
Yeah.
Right. He has a healthy concern for water, and we've worked on this in discussion, and he's easy to wrangle. I only got one too.
Right.
Yeah. And I think in that situation, maybe my wife's dip netting and I'm hanging with him, or the other way around, right? Someone's got supervision on him, but and you have a little bit better opportunity to do things that way.
Yeah. If you've got a whole herd running around, it's a little bit different story.
I do not advise that by any means. But kind of something to go off what you said about the water levels changing. I remember one time we were down there and we had gone to sleep, and we woke up the next day and my buddy's like, dude, we got a problem. I'm like, what's up, man? He's like, dude, all our fish are out of the water. So we had, and they were good. They were still cool, but the water level had dropped so much, our fish were up on the bank on the stringers. So that's something to consider, you know? Yeah.
It's the best word I can think to explain the water levels on that river is just dramatic. I mean, it is feet and feet of difference, like in no time.
Yeah, unless you're really well experienced and you have like a tight eye on the weather, temp wise, precipitation wise, it's going to be very hard to dictate what that thing's doing from hour to hour.
Right.
I mean,
well, and the thing with that is, I mean, and especially even below the bridge, I mean, that one thing I didn't think about too much. I mean, and not realizing just how dramatic the change in water level would be was all the spots that I had marked on access points. And I'm like, oh, I can come down here and there's a nice little back eddy here and there's this here and I can go up, around this spot. It's a little steep there, but then there's a nice little flat spot here and blah, blah, blah. And all these different things that I had planned out, right? All underwater that next morning by the time I woke up. And I mean, I wasn't sleeping until 10 or noon. It was like, just a workday morning, woke up at 6 and was like, okay, well, instead of working, I'm going to fish today. But no, man, like, it changed the game entirely. So now I'm recreating the game plan as I go, by the seat of my pants, I guess. And, it was still a fun time, but it was eye opening. I mean, you've really got to know what that river's doing.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing. And I think honestly, for anybody that's never been, that's going down there the first time, I mean, my recommendation would literally be just go down there 3 to 4 days and just learn it. Just get experience in that area, watch the river, watch the levels, watch what other people are doing, just learn.
Well, and a good thing to do also is kind of between social media, if you're not a social media person, is get in touch with a lot of these charters, because they don't want to have people come down and have a bad experience. They want to sell charters, right? And the last thing they need, they're pretty transparent about what's going on down there with the water levels, fish counts, conditions. They're a great resource to skip a trip that you don't need to take, right? And we've used that a lot. Those guys are super helpful.
Well, because I understand that like a lot of the population centers, I mean, no matter if you're coming from Anchorage or from Fairbanks, it's a 6-hour drive, long. You know, I mean, maybe a little bit less from Anchorage, but I mean, it's all of 6
I remember
hours from Anchorage.
There's
from Fairbanks. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like a horrible trek, but it's a trek.
It's a beautiful drive and it's an easy drive, but it's long.
Yeah. I remember one year we went down, got down there, and there's a certain charter that goes right out of O'Brien Creek there. And the way that they operate is you basically hold your place in line by a piece of gear, right? And so it's funny when you're new to it, you just see like this line of coolers going through the parking lot. When it's big, you're like, what the heck? And that's kind of the way you retain your spot, right? And to keep order. So I'm kind of new to it. I go down there and we meet up with some buddies there at O'Brien Creek, and we're hanging out, and It's late. We had worked all day, get down there. And my buddy's like, yeah, I'm going to go up here and chat these guys up. And I go down there and there's a guy sweeping the bank right by the charter line. And shoot, it's probably 11 o'clock at night. And I start seeing this guy get fish. And so I'm like, dude, and our whole thing is to get this charter, do all this stuff, right? We got this elaborate plan, but we also got some intel that fishing was bad. And everyone, the guys we had run into, they're like, no one's catching fish. It's just been a bum last few days. You guys made a trip for nothing. Well, my buddy starts to fall in and crash out. Well, I start watching this guy, and this guy's like, hey, he's like, are you fishing? I was like, yeah. He goes, get your stuff right now. I limited out in like an hour, sweeping the bank. So I go I get my buddy, and we just start digging into him.
Yeah.
And then the other guys, everyone was up there, soaking up suds and stuff, and
right
over it all. And that's another thing I don't recommend with Chitna.
Yeah.
You want to be on your A game. Don't, if you start getting tired or it's that you're going to enjoy a cold one, don't mix the two.
Right.
Exactly.
Stay
you
by
want
the
to be
fire.
alert and fresh.
Yeah.
But we limited out like immediately. And so that's just kind of a testament to how much this can change.
Yeah. In moments.
And I don't think people did very good the following day fishing. Right. And so those fish will move. A lot of people have theories on how these fish move, but those fish will kind of move under low light too. They'll really move. They'll start bumping each other out of those holes. And, and they'll kind of pin down during daylight hours. And so
like that midday, real hot, real bright.
Yeah. Or if you got a lot of debris in the water too, you got to think that's difficult if you're a fish just getting tagged with a bunch of stuff going by and dirty water. So those fish will hold to those pools and those deeper sections in that canyon, and they won't move as much. Yeah. And I'm not an expert on this by any means, but
you've done it enough.
I've played this game quite a bit, and that kind of seems to be the order of business. But those low light conditions are amazing fishing times. Yeah. Early morning, like you're saying, late, that's when those fish really start getting new fish in areas. Right. If it's hot. Yeah.
Well, and it makes perfect sense too, when the water levels drop during the cooler part of the day and everything like that. There's just it's easier access to the fish that are there anyways.
Yes.
That was the hard part with us when the water level was so high. I had my chest waders on, but I was out there as deep as I felt comfortable going. And it was to the point I was, one fell, little log coming down this river, and I'm a goner,
Yeah,
I was risking it.
Or take a sip over the waders, and you're It doesn't take much, man.
Yeah. No, I was taking some risks maybe I shouldn't have taken, but it was like, I'm here. I've got 2 days to make this happen. But it was I was out there a ways. It was not an easy trek back to, because the water was so deep. That's to get to the current, to get to where the fish are. That's. It was a hike.
We were kind of pushing it last year above the bridge at a spot, and a buddy of mine, he lost his footing and he went in.
Oh no!
And I threw the net, and then I kind of went after him. And you all that stuff, you do that so quick, but it's like that could be two guys going for a ride, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to stop that dude from taking off, but and he managed to get back on his feet again, and he was wet, and it doesn't take much.
No.
And I see some brave guys too. I've seen guys where they're anchored up out in the middle of that thing and on a gravel bar, and everyone's out of the boat. And I'm like, wow, you guys are, and there's different degrees of knowledge and stupidity, right? So,
right. Well, that's like, you see somebody like that and you're like, okay, which way are you leaning on? Do you know what you're doing so much so that it looks dangerous to me, but you're not scared at all? Or is this your first time?
Yeah.
But no, it's don't take risks. Salmon are tasty, but they're not worth dying over.
It's a great resource, and it's to be respected.
Yeah,
definitely.
The copper, people get hurt on that river every year. Whether it's on boats or getting swept off from shore. There's guys that'll basically belay down cliff faces. And if you know what you're doing, that's great. More power to you. But if you're not like a rock climbing fool, or you don't have the right equipment and you're just planning on tying a rope around your waist, I mean, just be careful.
Well,
You
and
know, we don't want anybody going down there and getting hurt.
one thing
That's the
I'd
big
say
thing.
too is like, and I don't know what a good juncture to project the safety concerns in this, but like I live in my life vest when I'm at Chitina anywhere, because and I watch guys. I'll tie off when I get down there. I'll put my life vest on once I get going, and you got to think about it like that. Especially when it's hot, those rocks are getting I mean hot as far as like the fishing's good.
Yeah.
Like those rocks are getting slippery. You're getting fish slime on those rocks. I mean it turns into a production down there, and you wait for a spot that a couple guys are leaving, they're limited out, and you go walk down in there, and those rocks are slick. Those guys have been getting there,
Right.
banging fish over the head down there, and there's slime and blood, and you go walk down there to get set up, and you slip and you hit your head on a rock, and it happens often enough that it should be a concern. And so, as the season progresses, it seems spots get more and more dangerous.
Yeah. So you had made mention that you like going there in August. Obviously, well, first off, you have the information, Mo.
Okay.
This is one benefit of, actually, you mentioned earlier, we tried to record yesterday and then had some issues on all sides. But
I think it worked out to our benefit.
It worked out to a lot of our benefits. I was able to do a lot of what I needed to last night. I know you were, Mo, you were able to go home and spend the evening with your family. And, but one benefit is the day that we're recording today. I believe you got some information, Mo, earlier today about some of the openers and whatnot that's going on down there.
Pulled up here.
Yeah.
So the first opener listed. They announced it today.
Mhm.
June 13th to 16th, 72 hours from 6 p.m. Thursday on the 13th through 6 p.m. Sunday on the 16th. That's going to be a wild time.
Yeah.
Be a lot of people there, but that's the Chitina Subdistrict Personal Use Tipnet Salmon Fishery.
And what's the website you went to find that info?
Fishing Game.
Fishing Game. Yeah.
Fishing Game, and then go to fishing, personal use fishing, emergency orders.
Perfect.
There.
Yeah. Just sort right through all of that stuff. And again, same thing we always talk about it with caribou and stuff like that. Before you even get in the truck to head down there, just double check. Just make sure. If you're hunting the 40-mile herd, we talk about it all the time, call that hotline before you take off out of your driveway, just to make sure you don't get, hours outside of town for nothing.
Well, and kind of like
same thing with salmon, because there's emergency orders that come out all the time saying, all right, nope, this evening we're done.
Kind of like when you're running like the 40-mile herd or any of those, you'll have those Post-its like at Chattanooga River Lodge or whatever, right?
Sure.
The same thing. You get into Chitina, if you got your peepers peeled, they put signage up, and ask a local if someone's around,
Well, and especially if you show up and you're the only person on that bank, maybe
you're either blessed or pushing it. One of those things again.
Yeah. It's kind of like showing up in caribou country and you're the only hunter there. Like, wow, this is weird.
They are on the yellow line today.
But it's either. But no, so yeah, opener, you said June 13th was when that one comes open. So, but I mean, I've heard there's like 3 to 4 different runs that come up through that river. In your experience over the years, have you noticed like hot times versus like dead times versus like kind of like because I was talking to a guy actually down there at the mouth of the trail there, the O'Brien Creek Trail, last year, and he was telling me how basically it seemed like there was just high points and low points of the runs, and he's like you'll be in between a run here, and then like give it 2 weeks, they'll be the numbers will be back up and everything. In your experience, I mean, in August, I mean, even that late, I mean, good numbers of salmon still running and everything like that.
Well, yeah. Well, so August really like kind of what's a good way to approach this? I think what happens is a lot of people in August are moving on to other things, right? Mm-hmm. Traditionally, we're all if you're a hunter,
right?
You're moving on to you're starting to think about caribou hunting come August, right?
Caribou, sheep,
you've hung the dip nets up. you've packed your fish up and
Yeah.
that's over, right? But that can be really prime time. And there's, you have people that try to intercept those kings too, because the kings we might want to look at this too, and it seemed like they'll kind of taper off towards the end where the sockeyes are still moving, and then you start getting like the silvers, you start getting the silver arrival and stuff like that. But, like if you're targeting kings, dip netting, going after them a little earlier is kind of to your benefit, because they will move up, and then that's the end of that.
Gotcha.
And I don't know what the exact date is on that. I feel like that's kind of maybe more of a July thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Something to track.
And of course, it's going to change year after year.
Well,
I mean, for the specific dates per se, but just kind of general time.
And our runs are always different.
Yeah.
It's just like anything. And so right where the copper dumps into Cordova there, you've Miles Lake sonar is 70 miles upriver of Cordova.
From Cordova.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's about like a 2-week journey is what they call it, right?
Okay. Yep.
And then you've got about another 70 miles from Miles Lake sonar to Chitna. Right. So you're prospectively looking at a 4-week window when you start tracking this from beginning to end. And there is different runs. I thought there was 2. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Going later, you can run into you're starting to run into late run fish, right? And the quality starts diminishing.
Okay.
And that can be noticeable. Sometimes they're a little blushed out. The meat's still good.
Sure.
It's all a matter of preference.
Right.
I think I made a comment in one episode. My wife, I looked at her last year. I was like, you want caribou or fish?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was that time to make a decision.
Right.
And so the fish were still looking good. And so that's where I directed my efforts.
Gotcha.
But,
and these sonar stations, I mean, that's public information as far as the counts and everything like that go, right?
It is. Yep.
Yeah. You can just go to the websites and find that info.
They'll kind of post a number every now and again, and
yeah. And I know I've watched the different stations along the Yukon, kind of keeping an eye on what's happening with that and all the hardships those fish have been having. And we brought that up in a couple different episodes, hopefully I'm working hard to get an expert on about that but unfortunately they're all very busy actually fighting that good fight. So, when they have time to come talk to some, little podcast in Fairbanks about it, then we'll do that.
And we're not experts by any means. We're just trying to give people enough to get after it,
But and that's kind of the basis behind our God Save the King t-shirt design. It's kind of just help support that kind of the fight for better salmon management in specifically the Yukon fishery areas. But really, I mean, kings are hurting all over the state. Just not necessarily in quite as dire of a way as they are off the Yukon. But like I said, I know a lot of people that are fighting this. There's actually a really great article I wanted to read at the beginning of this episode, but just didn't seem to kind of fit in with what we were talking about. But I'll save that for another episode coming up. But some really great insights into kind of why the fish are struggling and whatnot right now. But along these, like the Copper River, and there's others down off like the Kenai Peninsula that you can go to if you're more in that southern part of the state. That might be a little easier to get to. Each river is going to have its own rules, its own regulations, its own methods of fishing. Some are, you can dip net in more places than just Chitna, than just the Copper River. But some of those areas, it's like, okay, between mile this and mile that is where you can dip net. Everything else is rod and reel only, or fly fishing and stuff like that. So no matter where you go, just make sure we'll reference back to this a lot in this episode, but make sure you're checking in and reading the regs, because sometimes I almost went down there was areas down there like by Seward last year. They actually raised the limit that you could take last summer.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember.
Yeah, and I was like,
I think they raised bag limits.
Yeah, increasing bag limits. So sometimes it's a good thing to check in, and because you might be able to take more than you thought. Maybe raising it from 6 a day to 9 or something like that. But sometimes there's emergency orders that come down, and even rivers that aren't necessarily hurting as bad, like the copper, they might do an emergency closure for a week just to get an eye of what's happening, because they got to have enough salmon get to the spawning grounds to make sure that resource continues.
Something I was going to side note, but if you're sort of like tracking those fish numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see people getting a tizzy. You can track this on Facebook. You can you can see people running in getting their tip net permits in at Fish and Game, and it really like the traffic really ups. And you see, and it's funny too. You start around town, you see everyone's dip nets hanging out, and everyone's just really gearing up to like hard charge this, right?
Yep.
And I think something to consider, that's something that's gotten us in the past, is you'll look at those numbers, and so you got that 2 weeks to account for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're like, okay, cool. I'm going to take this date off, and you burn that time. And I think something to consider in your planning is that if you're dealing with like adverse weather, like a lot of rainfall or really warm temps, that's going to manipulate that estimated time, right?
100%.
And so that can turn into 3 weeks. That can turn into 4 weeks. And in fact, that happened several times last year, where people got really geared up. I'm going to take this time off. Sometimes people are limited on time. It can be a very hard thing to time.
I would say oftentimes a lot of people they're either making bonsai runs down there, where it's like leave, Friday after work.
Yeah.
Come home Sunday, not actually take any time off work. Sometimes they might only have be able to take a 4-day weekend.
Yeah, I talked to guys last year that limited out doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it happens every year, but I mean, to your point, I mean, when you're planning out which weekend to take and go do that, I mean, all of that data is important.
Dude, like, and I'll leave. I mean, I'll leave all my gear in the pickup, and I'll drive my little mom car around during the week, dude. And like, I mean, any chance I get, I'll peel out of here.
Right.
And it's like anything else. Sometimes you're empty-handed, and sometimes you come home with a pile of fish. And but that's just something to consider. That can be very deceiving. You're like, oh, okay, 2 weeks. And you see everyone get mobed up to go after this. And if we're getting a lot of rainfall or warm temps, I mean, that can turn into 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We've watched it. I've seen like the locals. I got a guy down there that takes us out, and I talk to him a lot. He's super helpful. He kind of lets us call pretty much whenever we want and ask him, pick his brain on what's going on. And he's like, dude, fish still aren't here.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
Well, and that's the best resource there is, because they're there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're watching this every single day, That was like, we had that day I was down there with the high water, that whole week leading up to that, all my buddies and people I'm looking at, they're all saying, oh, dude, limited out in 2 hours, limited out in an hour and a half, limited out like crazy, blah, blah, blah. I went down there, and the water, when it was high, and I mean, granted, I was very limited on time off last year. I'm hopefully going to have a little bit more leeway this year, but last year it was just to the wall, and so I was down there when I could be, and the water happened to be high. It went from the week prior, everyone limiting out in a matter of hours, to I was talking to this group, and it was pretty incredible to watch. I mean, we'll talk more about equipment and stuff a little bit later, but they had this massive net, and it like took 2 people to run it, and they were out, getting right into the current and just like walking this cliff edge.
That's such an effective way to do it too.
Right there by the bridge. And I went down and I talked to him. I'm like, how you guys doing? We haven't caught anything all day. And everybody I've seen going down all the way down O'Brien Creek Trail, they're all coming back, after 3 or 4 hours, saying, oh, not catching anything down there either. And we're all going up and down trying to catch fish. They're like, yeah, we're catching about 1 an hour.
Yeah.
Like, and that was in a matter of, 2 days, 3 days ago, people were limiting out in 2 hours. That's how fast it can change.
And that's back to like everything else. If that's worth your time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's times I want fish.
Yeah.
I'm walking through the door with fish. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care if I weigh 20 pounds less and I'm falling apart.
Yeah.
I'm taking fish home. Right.
Right.
But like, no, and I had a buddy that we would shoot several times. We've had it where he's like, I'll be on a job or something, finishing up, and he's like, "Hey man, it's on fire down here. We just limited out. We're getting ready to head back to Fairbanks."
Mhm.
And he's like, "Take my truck. Don't even, dude, everything's in here. Wheeler's in here." Him and I played that game for several years. He's moved since, but we used to have a really good system. And I remember taking his truck one time. I mean, we literally like switched hands. He's like, "Let me get my fish out, take the cooler. There's still ice that we didn't use." I mean, that kind of
Nice.
that kind of strategic, right? Go down there, nothing. And everyone's like, "Yep, everyone caught fish last night," but and I mean,
12 hours of difference.
that's just the way it goes. Exactly. So, and we've had it where we've switched out like that, and you gone down and you limit it out quick.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
it's a roll of the dice every time.
Well, and the thing I love about it is like, it's more the people that get hyped on this thing too. It is what makes it cool, because you've got guys that are, all about bear baiting, and bear baiting's all they do, and they want to be out there bear baiting, and that's all they talk about. It's all they think about. It's all they do. You've got the same caliber of people about dip netting.
Oh yeah.
Where it's
true.
just, man, I can't wait till dip netting opens up. I can't wait till, go down there and get my fish. I can't wait to go do this. And they've got all the fancy gear, and they've got this different stuff set up for it, and they're all decked out, and, they're talking about it. And then you've got guys that are honestly like, yeah, I'm not doing that. That sucks. Like, it's too much work. I'm not going down there to do that.
Like you say, there's guys that'll haul, they'll get the chest freezer cooled off,
Yeah.
and take their ice, and they'll take the vacuum sealers down there and the generator.
Right.
I mean, it's no joke.
It's a full operation.
Yeah, and I mean, it's I got buddies. They'll start brining fish from the ride home. They'll dump them right in a cooler. They'll brine them and get them back to town and get them on the smoker. I mean, they're just making use of all that time, all that down. Your drive time is brine time.
Absolutely.
If you're crunching time.
Absolutely. And I mean, and it's a chore. I mean, I've watched, these operations. I mean, like, it is not light work. Like, it's not easy.
It can be exhausting.
But I mean, it's just talking to these people that are all geeked up on it. It's amazing. Like, I don't know when the point in my life will be that I'll have all the toys and all the equipment to be, that guy, but it's a goal of mine. It's a goal of mine.
You just never have everything. There's always one more piece.
Because even that guy wishes he had other things, right?
Exactly.
I feel like I feel so geared up some days, and then other days I'm like, man, I'm really lacking a lot of equipment here. And I'll talk to some of my buddies. They're like, dude, you have so much stuff. Like, I'm like, oh yeah.
Well, it's like, for me, it's always when I'm sitting in tree stand or at a bear bait or sitting somewhere, and I'm just sitting there. My gear's I'm all set out, right? And reach is hanging right there. GoPro's sitting here, thermocell sitting here, right? And I've got like clamps for everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can just clamp it on, and it's just sweet. And I'm sitting there, backpack out, and for everything's just nice and comfortable. And you start looking, and you go, "There's a lot of money sitting around me right here."
Right?
I mean, like, I took a picture of like the GoPro and the thermocell, like set up with the bait in front of it, like, oh, that looks cool. And then I thought,
Oh yeah,
there's $1,000.
Oh yeah, all day,
dude.
Or
Like,
not GoPro and thermocell, GoPro and InReach.
InReach, yeah.
And for the average working guy, I mean, if you're not just appendaging extra finances, that is that it can be hard to accumulate all the gear.
Right. Well, it's just
all this
slow,
stuff.
one piece at a time.
Yeah.
Save up for it, right? Like,
I was gonna say, that's the one thing we talk about all the time is every payday, a little bit of money towards it. If you have a big item, $50 a payday, it'll get you there. It might not be quick, but it'll be before the next season opens up.
It'll be faster than waiting until you have enough money.
Exactly.
And I think
taking care of your stuff so that by the time you have that next piece, the piece you bought last time isn't worn out. Yeah, you're not replacing things year after year. A lot of people, they'll even cheap gear, if you take care of it, it'll last you. Like some things obviously are cheap to last, but I mean, cheap boots, if you're not abusing them and you coat them with some good weather coating and whatnot, and I mean, you can make cheap boots last. I've done it. Like, it's not that hard.
You can also just buy a new pair of cheap boots every year, and it doesn't cost you $400.
Yeah, true.
True. Well, I think, like, even with this, that's a good thing to keep in mind is that there's the expensive approach, and there's the cheap approach, and they can both, the cost effective can be very effective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I don't know if we want to get into that just yet, but
well, we can. But real quick. Mo, let's take a break real fast.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
All right, so equipment. You said there's the bougie way and there's the the cheap way. So
Yep.
why don't we start with the affordable entry level way, and then we can get expensive if we want to.
So, I mean, sort of, every place, every local store is going to have an affordable option.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not all, you're probably looking at about $100 to get a dip net set up.
Yeah, I was just saying, I was down at Frontiers the other day, and they had theirs all set up and good to go. And they have the decent sized nets and everything, and some are telescoping, some are clipped together, like 6-foot add-ons and stuff like that. And it seemed to be about that $100 mark.
Yeah, and you can buy like more extension pieces and different stuff. And
right, yeah.
They offer almost kind of like, like the weed eater handles that you got on your weed eater.
Yeah, yep.
They kind of offer like some different handle options that kind of accommodate the diameter of those tubes to kind of give you a little bit more leverage on those setups.
Right. Yeah. They just kind of clamp down
them
on those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can do that. I wouldn't say, dip nets are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Overall. But you can go get one. I recommend, so there's like your mesh style net. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's as effective. Okay. It's a little more sturdy material.
Yeah.
So it tends to not like open up as well.
That's what I experienced last year.
Yeah. And that's one element of it. And you still get fish. You'll still get fish with the mesh net style. What I like to use is they have like they either come with it or they have a replacement gill net style material. Okay. And that's what I would recommend.
It's a little bit bigger in between.
Well, it's so the mesh is sort of like a woven material.
Okay. Yep.
Almost like a twine or like a rope. And it's larger diameter. It's just a little bigger.
Right.
Your gill net style nets are thin. They're like a monofilament style net.
Oh, gotcha. Right? Okay.
Sort of more what you see like in a commercial gill netting application like that, or like set nets that you see some places where people are able to do that legally.
Yeah, and that's probably a lot more flexible too. And like you had mentioned, it opens up probably a lot easier.
Well, they're lighter. Yeah. They open up. They're a little easier to manipulate. They're a little easier to set that up to set it.
Have you noticed they get damaged easier?
Like, and they do. They're a lot less like abrasion resistance, obviously, because now you're getting into like a single fiber instead of like a woven fiber, right?
Right. Yeah. Because those ones they have at Frontier, like what you and I were using to pull the beavers out this spring. That was essentially just a dip net.
That's like a standard,
but it was like a very dense, very thick netting.
Yeah, and you can dip net with that success, but you're gonna have less success. Mm-hmm. So the idea behind the gill net is that it actually they get tangled in it,
right?
And they won't get tangled in that mesh like that. So there's a method. I think it'd be kind of hard to go into without visual.
Of course, yeah.
But there's different methods depending on what sort of circumstances you're fishing in, that like different ways you set the net that are beneficial, and different ways once you get a bump, like you have a fish in there, that you can turn the net. Different people have different methods for retrieving fish in nets. that gill net seems to be a little more forgiving, and that those fish get tangled up in that a lot better.
Yeah, so they're not going to back out of that net
exactly.
at all.
Whereas with that mesh net, it's a little more forgiving, and they can roll out of there. They can get acrobatic and squirrel out of there.
Right.
With the gill net, not so much.
The more they squirm, the more stuck they get. Essentially,
yeah, and so you'll see. And that kind of comes with like net shapes. So some nets you'll have like a rectangular shape.
Yeah.
And some nets you'll have like a hoop style, like a round net. And those round nets are kind of a little more useful. That's something to consider too, is weight. So you can get beefier setups with bigger hoops and all this stuff. That stuff, like if you're drifting from a boat, is one means of dip netting.
Right.
Or if like you're in the canyon there and you're working like a deep pool, you're not moving that net around. You're not, because you're kind of setting that net and holding it in one spot. You're not really fighting the current. Like if you get in a good little back eddy or like some slack water,
you're waiting for the fish to come to you.
Yeah, because they're pulling off to take a break out of that fast current.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they'll hold up in those pools. And so you're not really manipulating the net much while you're doing that. That you're more stationary.
Right.
So the weight isn't so much a factor. More lightweight equipment doesn't really apply to that situation. I mean, it's like a lightweight rifle versus a heavy rifle. You're going to go down there, you're going to plan it.
A lot of it's about how much you're moving, in addition to everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like above the bridge, like where we fish, and I had a little bit of a learning curve when I first started doing that. A lot of guys will use like a rolling technique. And so with that gill net style net, and I remember the first time I watched it, I'm like, what the heck? Like I literally thought these guys had no idea what they were doing. So that's where you're using that rectangular style.
Okay. Yeah.
With that gill net. And what they'll do is, because that current's a lot more swift and it's rockier and you don't have those calm water opportunities.
Gotcha.
What they'll do is they'll actually set that net upstream and then let it roll down the current. And you'll actually watch those guys, that handle, they're like twirling it in their hand. That net's not even open. It's just rolling.
Gotcha.
And the first time you see it, you're like, no way. So those fish will actually get caught on the outside of that net, inside the net. We've gotten it where we've pulled them in and the fish are caught you'll have a fish on the outside of the net, on the inside of that. It's really odd. It's a big switch up from like if you're used to the traditional means of.
Sure.
Right.
But it's a gill net essentially is what you're doing. So you're manipulating that net through the water. And wherever they hit that net's where they're going to get tangled.
Yep. And you'll get them and they'll pop off sometimes. But that style, whatever hoop style you decide to go with, I'd recommend that you get that gill net style net, and they'll sell like replacements for those.
I was going to say, so you'd mentioned it's a replacement kit you can add on to things. How easy is that to like take the old net off, put the new net on? Like because those ones might be more prone to damage or something like that. If you were wanting to bring an extra net or two with you down there, because it's a long drive. You don't want to have something get damaged and then now your drive was for nothing. Is that something you could probably do in camp if anything was to happen?
You could do that with like a Leatherman.
Okay.
Generally, some of those, they're like more fixed style. Some of them, like I have one that's really beefy that you need like a socket wrench and like
gotcha.
Probably like another buddy, right? And,
yeah.
I haven't beat on it enough yet to go down that road to see what fixing it entails or replacing it entails. I'll update you when I get to that point. But so yeah, they're pretty easy to repair on site.
Mm-hmm.
And you can carry those nets. They come in like a little like sandwich bag when you buy them, and they'll come with the dimensions on there. You can make sure. And another thing you can do with those gill net style nets, even if they don't quite match the dimensions of your hoop,
sure,
it doesn't really matter if you have like a little more or a little less.
Right. Yeah.
Like you can work. They're almost in a sense like universal.
Might make it a little bit longer, a little bit shorter of a net overall, but like not the end of the world.
Yeah.
So question on that. I know gill netting, there's usually a size limit on the net mesh. bigger. It can't be bigger than this. Can't be smaller than this.
4 inches.
And I
or
believe
5
it's
inches,
measured
something.
by like the knots in the net, like pulled straight apart, like how far apart they are.
Right.
Is there a limit at all for that you know for dip netting?
You know, I'm not 100% sure.
There may not, because it's a lot easier with dip netting to pull a fish out and say, "Oh, I can't keep that." And
if there
toss it
is,
back in,
I'm sure
but-
it'd be pretty easy to find.
I'm gonna like kind of
website.
and I kind of assume, and going off assumption can be dangerous when you're
Right.
doing this stuff, but we've had like interactions with wildlife troopers and stuff, and they've checked our equipment, checked our paperwork and everything, and I've never had any. I've
Okay.
never gotten any
Yeah.
like resistance from those guys as far as like us using the
Right.
wrong stuff.
Well, and part of that, and I mean, this is also not a guarantee, but if they're selling it in the stores for use for people to buy, to go down there and use, there's a good possibility that they've done the research and that is a legal thing for you to use. Again, not a guarantee.
Right.
Do your research, but there's a good chance, right?
Right, well,
if you're buying it
right.
at Sportsman's, it's probably not an illegal thing to use.
Well, I do ask the question. I mean, they sell turkey calls at Sportsman's too, so
You can use turkey calls up here.
you can. I just
Coyotes.
just
and
say
all
not
kinds of
everything
stuff.
purchased there is. Anyway, that's another topic. But the biggest reason I asked the question is because that will actually change, like fishery to fishery, location
It
to
will.
location.
Absolutely.
Those types of regulations will change based on the fish they want you or don't want you to catch,
Absolutely.
based on the size of those fish.
Yeah.
It may not exist for dip netting, or it may not exist in that area, right?
Yeah.
It may be any size.
I would think, that should be something that's probably pretty easy to find,
Right.
right on Fish and Game's website. So that's usually things like that they put pretty front and center on those web pages when you're looking into the dip netting rules and regulations and everything like that.
right.
But the shape of those nets is really probably one of the most intriguing things about it, because you go to Sportsman's and let's just say, I think they've got like 3 or 4 different sizes of hoop net that are just perfect circles, big hoops at the end of a long stick. You go to Frontiers, they've got those ones that are almost kind of, I don't even know what you'd call them. They're like kind of acorn shaped almost. They got a flat end on the far side, and they just kind of taper to where the extendable arm is, and that's like what we were using this spring.
Yeah.
And that's what I took down there last year. Was
that
a
works
net
good
that
too,
style.
to get on the bottom of like some of those holes,
right.
because your net design, depending on the type of fishing you're doing, and that's going to really be, especially if you go down, you're going to, I would say, having like a feel out visit.
Yeah.
See what everyone's using, talk to people.
For sure.
Everyone has difference in opinions. I had a lot of resistance to going to the rectangular style, and because I'm not familiar with that, right? And so we stick to what we're familiar with, and once I gave up on that, I started getting fish, right? Because that's like everything else. But and that application is probably not going to be like the best in like the canyon, or that seems to work a little better when you're like bank fishing.
Sure. Yeah.
And you don't have those holes, and those fish aren't as sort of restricted to location, right? They're kind of a little more scattered. And you'll have that too when you're like bank fishing, like above the bridge. We'll have fish running into our feet and our shins, and we've had it where your initial thought is you want to get out in the water, and they're going to be right where this drops off. Well, sometimes, we've caught them where they're 2 feet off the shore, and that's another thing to play with, is different distances, because we've had it where we've spooked the fish off. We've stood there, we've got the water all silted out, and those fish, all they do is they just move further out and further out and further out, and so sometimes you don't need that 20-foot extension, or
right.
they're just right there. We've had it literally where they're, especially when it's low light, we've had it where they're 2-3 feet off the bank, and that's where we're getting them.
Sure. Yeah.
Which
Well, and that's like with how, simple or complicated you want to get with the setup. I was talking earlier about that group of netters that I ran into by the bridge when the water was super high, and they were only catching like 1 an hour, right?
Yeah.
But their setup was super cool. And they said, in years past, they'd used it for, and they'd limit it out quickly.
Did they have that rectangular style?
So it was weird. Yeah, it had like a 20 or more length rod on this thing. The pole was super long. And it was like a 2-person thing, right? But it was like a P-shaped. So it was rectangular, but it didn't connect in the center of the rectangle.
Hooped off the bottom.
Yeah, it hooped off the bottom of it, and then they had floaties on the top and weights on the bottom. And so then when they run it out into the current, and they were doing just like
did one person have a rope go into the end of that net, and then the other person manning it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great way to do
and
it.
And they were doing just what you said. They would walk it up, and then they would just kind of walk it down the current, and just kind of get to a point where they'd pull it back in, and then reset, and walk it down the current, and then reset. And they just had this. I mean, it was a group of people. It was like 6 people, and they would switch out. 2 would run it until they got tired, and then sub out. 2 more people would run it. And those guys would go up there, get some water, get some food.
Well, it's nice about that too is you can slow that sweep.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have someone that's got that, so you use like a piece of 550 or like rope.
Sure.
You can slow that sweep down and sort of keep that in the hot zone longer, right?
Yeah.
And so I mean, as we all know, those of us that have done it, it can get exhausting, especially if you're working in current. You're not in calm water,
right?
You're picking that thing up. You're sweeping it. You're bumping you're ticking those rocks. That's kind of the idea. You can almost kind of hear and feel a tick. And that lets you know that you're on the bottom where you need to be. Shoot, sometimes it's so swift you can't even get that bottom contact.
I know, it pushes you off,
and you'll still get fish that way too, because they're at different depths in that water column, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and then then they'll use they'll gauge that depth, they'll really get it dialed, and they'll put those milk jugs and stuff up high to keep that net vertical and keep that thing the way it needs to sit.
That's what I thought was genius. Yeah, the way they had the floats and the weights in combination, and that's exactly what it was for, is just to keep it facing the right way, And I mean, nobody was catching fish but them that day. Nobody. And so, I mean, whatever they were doing, it was working.
I feel like every time I'm down there, I see some new method that blows my mind too.
Yeah.
Because you're like, it's just dip netting. It's like this. Yeah, sure. It's the same technique, same thing, but it's not. People put their own spin on it.
Right.
I mean, we saw a guy last year. Nobody was out there. It was bad. The numbers were bad at the time that we had gone down. We just went. We just sent it. We had some time off. We wanted to fish. We're like, whatever. But he had like a 24-foot pole, and this dude was tiny. This is a little man, and he's throwing this thing out there. And he's like, I mean, he's barely getting in, and he would get like 2-3 fish at a time.
Yeah.
But I mean, and you'd never dare walk out far enough with like a 12-foot or a 15-foot dip net, right?
Sure.
I mean, most of us wouldn't have the equipment to access where this guy was putting this thing. But I'm like, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's played this game before.
That's years of experience.
Yeah.
And tinkering
and he wasn't doing the full sweep either. He wasn't throwing it like way up and utilizing. I mean, it was almost like he had like a 10-foot range where he'd put that thing in, and he just had that angle just right. And that thing would go in, it would sink, and then he'd be on to fish. And it was awesome. I'm like,
the fish whisperer.
Yeah. Well, and so that kind of leads me to the next thing. You can get into, so getting on like the higher end of stuff, and sort of like your mountain rifle of dip netting, right?
Right.
Alaska Gear Company has some really cool dip net options. And they have, I don't know, I looked at their little catalog here, but they've got like a dip net that's tailored specifically to the Kenai.
Really?
Yep. There's a Chitna dip net package. And so these are really lightweight setups. They have a Cub dip net package. That's sort of like the name sort of implies, it's a net that you would break down and use like in a Super Cub.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
great,
meant to break down and fit in a cockpit on a Cub.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you've got those super long extensions and everything like that, I mean, that's going to be a nightmare to try and fit in one of those.
Well,
things.
yeah. And so, I had a good plethora of dip nets in the yard. And I mean, some of these things, they're unmanageable, and they all have fit their different application.
Sure.
But kind of one thing I really dig about the stuff these guys make is it's really lightweight. The weight is in mind when they engineer these things, and they're pretty self-explanatory by the names. If you look at them now, some of these I'm looking $395, $295, $195, and then they've got like some sort of carry case that you can break this down. So you're getting into some dough, but they're a pretty reputable company. They make some really good quality stuff. That's something I would be proud to spend my money on, and like you're buying something that's going to kind of stand up to this.
And I've been super stoked ever since Alaska Gear Co. became a thing. I mean, when they combined all of those companies into Alaska Gear Co. I mean, that's a beautiful marriage of companies. Honestly, they make so much cool stuff.
Yeah, like, cold fronts, and I buy tons of stuff from those guys. Like, they really, their name fits the bill.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of these, like some of the pictures they got on here, these come equipped with that gill net style.
Oh, perfect.
Net. So, I mean, they got that figured out too.
Well, and it kind of falls back to one of those things where it's like, there is an aspect of, if you don't know if you're going to like it or not, buy the simple gear, go out and try it, or buy the simple gear to go try it. And then you can fish while you're there, but then you're eyeballing what everybody else is using, get an idea of the game plan. Which style do you think you would like better? And there's that research phase, right? And that's that perfectly good way to do it. But there's also the buy once, cry once kind of mentality, where it's like, this works. It's been proven. Like, it's going to be good gear. It's going to cost you more, but you're going to buy it. You're going to learn how to use it, and you're going to be successful with it. And it's kind of whatever meets your personality type. Are you the kind that wants to go down there and tinker and then fine tune it to you, or are you okay with just buying it with what everybody else says works because they've done it, they've done the tinkering for you, and you're just going to learn their method and do it their way, and both ways can lead to really great success.
Yeah.
But
I think there's that whole that buy a bunch, cry a bunch too. Right.
There is definitely that.
And one thing I would say too, because I think we're all kind of like, I think Alaska Gear Co.'s got our vote here on the podcast. Cause I mean, they're good. They're just awesome. And they're helpful. I go in there all the time, and those guys, they probably pick the dude that just loves to talk the most when they see me walk through the door and like, go deal with that dude. Yeah. But they're super helpful. And if you I think you go in somewhere like that and talk to those guys, they're going to give you a good layout on what to do. Something else I would recommend too is if you're going to go for the first time, it is a little bit of an investment. Maybe take a charter to get like a feel for how this works before you go at it alone, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're going to kind of see what gear they're recommending, the kind of spots they're putting you up on, and you'll see those guys make decisions on the fly. They'll run you out to a rock, and you'll see them kind of look at, and they're picking people up along the way too. They'll drop people off. They're picking people up, and you'll kind of see what different things are standing out to these guys, these guides, these transport guys that are like putting people on different spots. And
that's a perfect. That's perfect what you just said, because even if you're not planning on taking a boat every single year, because I mean those charters can get spendy. I mean it's $300+ per person for a lot of them, but then you can experience drifting from the boat. There's guys you can go with, and you stay in the boat and you just drift with the nets and limit out that way. But then they'll take you to the places where you're going to catch fish. Like they'll drop off, pick up. And yeah, you're not going to go right back to those exact places because those are boat access only places, right? But if you're looking for like, okay, I've never dip netted before, I've never even gone after salmon before, where do they hang out? Man, I do stuff like that all the time, even when I'm just talking to other people and they're like, yeah, when I was early on moose hunting and stuff like that, oh, this is where we find the moose. And I'm not looking to go where they're hunting moose. I'm looking for the features of that area. What makes that a moosey area? And then I can go find something similar somewhere else, right? Where it's my spot. But for salmon, it's the exact same thing. I mean, why not learn from the pros? I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah. And I mean, and those guys, like, that's, it's like buying a hunting guide, right? Mm-hmm. Those guys want you to succeed. They want you to go back home and brag them up, talk them up, and they don't want you to have a bad experience. Yeah. Because I mean, it's that goes a long way, right?
I'm looking at this chit and a dip net package you were just talking about on that's a sweet looking setup.
And dude. I mean, here's the deal, right? Like, I like where I'm going next is I'm going to drop the money on one of these things. I mean, that's a lifestyle thing.
And that's that style I was talking about, the P-shaped kind of rectangular hoop there with the T handle on the end. Oh man, that looks slick. Do you like T handles or do you like the kind of the more, I don't know what you'd call it, but just the regular
regular
rectangular
D-loop on the end?
D-loop handle, yeah, something like that.
Whatever's comfortable for you. And like I just sort of like all my other gear, I will mod stuff out. Like I'll take
Right.
I have like some dip nets. Like if I'm working in current where I'm like resting something on my hip or something, because you'll start finding different ways to leverage these things in different conditions.
Yeah.
I'll put pipe insulation around that where that's gonna be contacting my body a lot, right?
Yeah.
You'll see guys like tie these things off too.
In case your grip slips.
Well, that, and one thing I'll say is like, and I don't like to glorify any of this stuff, but in the past, like people have lost their lives hanging on the nets.
Oh yeah.
And like one thing I'll say is, sometimes in certain conditions, I'll tie my net off. Like if I have a chance of losing it, like that's one thing I'll throw out there. I guess now is as good a time as any. If you get that net snagged up and you are wrestling that net, let go of it. Guys have done this in boats. There was a situation years ago where people got this net snagged and they didn't let go of the net, and the bow of the boat dipped and the boat went in. They went in and they lost their lives. Right? Like, if that net in bank fishing, it takes nothing to get into serious trouble on any of those banks.
Yeah.
And that, even like I fish above the bridge, it's a lot safer. It doesn't matter. 3 feet of water will kill you on that river.
Absolutely.
You lose your footing and stuff fills up
because it's fast.
That's
high pressure.
They've done studies on this. Like, there's different things you can look. I'm not going to get too into the weeds on this because I don't want to have a war of the wits with anybody out there, but you can Google this stuff about like having chest waders on and a life jacket and how they contradict one another in a flotation situation, right?
Yeah.
There's videos you can watch on this and it's spooky.
Chest waders can be one of the most dangerous things you're wearing, to be honest with you.
Well, and like there's a lot of scenarios where feet go up, heads go down with life vests on and all sorts of different, or the weight of like, I saw this guy do this thing the other day. I was just cruising the internet. I saw this dude, he puts chest waders on. He's like a fly fishing guru, right? Gets in his swimming pool and he's treading water, right? Like, I'm sorry, dude. That's not the Copper River.
No.
Like, and that's great. Good for you. What a cool video, man.
Right.
Like, and he's talking about how, he's debunking, do hip waders work against you or whatever? And slipping them off. He slipped them off with relatively with ease, right? You're not going to do that when there's a couple things going on with this. You've got silty, freezing cold water, that is just above freezing. Even in the middle of July, like at our peak warm season, that water temperature is not far above freezing. And you go into that, there's a lot of things happening. You're stuff's filling up with water.
Yeah.
If you hit your head before you went in, or you fell down something of rock face or something before you went in, and you're not 100% by the time you hit that water, that initial cold shock you want to do everything you can to be.
Yeah. But because you're not going to be thinking straight when you're tumbling, because it's fast water. So you're not stagnant, just sitting there treading water. You're fighting for every breath.
Yeah.
You're getting weighed down. You're getting pushed to places you don't know where you're going.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, my buddy went in, he was 20 feet away, like here and now, in like 3 feet of water. I mean, it doesn't take much.
Yeah.
And, you can get disoriented quick, and that stuff pummels you.
Well, and there's a lot of times when you're walking that current, like where those people were down by the bridge last year, they had found a shelf. We're walking the edge of that shelf. You take one wrong step off that shelf, and it could be 6 feet down until the next, stable ground.
What's the difference between 6 feet and 100 feet in those circumstances?
Exactly.
Right?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because you're not going to find either one.
2 feet.
Yeah. Because you're not going to find either one.
You lose your footing. Right?
And I remember like one year I was sweeping the bank at O'Brien, and we were literally there was like 3 of us. It was a blast. We're having a blast. But I remember we're running down the bank. That's what we were doing. We were getting our fish running the bank with the net.
Yep.
Right. So literally stick the net in, and we were just like daisy chaining this thing. We'd run back up and we were just we were getting tired and like hopping out. And and it was effective. We're getting fish.
Yeah.
Right. Every once in a while, someone's breaking formation, like getting a fish out or huffing and puffing. And all that stuff's fun. You're not tied off.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, and it's effective, right? But it's the kind of risk you want to take.
Right.
And like, let's face it, well, I don't care, I don't care. I'm not worried about it. Well, there's a guy that like is going to attempt to like go after you and like help you, or the people that got resources that got to get deployed to go search for you, and you're endangering those people too. So
yeah,
it doesn't stop at you.
Exactly.
It's
exactly.
It's got residual effect.
Yep.
And it's just a place to respect for sure.
Yeah. And honestly, any of Alaska's waterways are. I mean, they're all dangerous. They're all extremely cold. They're all faster than they look, especially the surface level. I mean, we've even talked about the Chena here in town. It's like everybody just floats it recreationally, and that's great. And the parts in town are pretty safe. You're probably not going to get hurt at the parts running through Fairbanks, but like there are parts of that river that are deep and fast, a lot faster than you might think they are.
Yeah, temps and stuff.
Yeah.
I've heard of people driving home from the day on the Chena, and they start getting hypothermia symptoms in the car listening to music on the way home. And they're like, what the heck's going on? Or like someone's acting weird, right? I mean,
yeah, because it might be an 80-degree summer day, but that water's still cold. And especially if you're just in an inner tube sitting there with half your body in the water, you're going to, your internal body temp's going to go.
Sucking your heat out.
Yeah.
Well, what happens like in that situation is like when you get your appendages, your legs get cold and you're not moving, your blood's moving really slow, right? You can like sit. I had this happen to me last year moose hunting. It was just a really cold night, tons of moose activity. I sat till it was too dark to shoot, right? And just having a great old time. But I got up and walked back to my tent. I was hunting like 50 yards from my tent. By the time I got back to my tent, I was shivering like crazy. I was fine sitting on that stump because my core was warm, but I didn't have much on my legs for insulation, right? And that was the biggest thing. As soon as all that blood in my legs pumped up into my core, I was shivering. I crawled into. I didn't take a thing off. I crawled into my sleeping bag, wet and all, and just like got my jet boil out and got soup going, and and like it took me a good amount of time. Like I went hypothermic very quickly.
Yeah.
Like not to the point, not dangerously so, but although it could have been.
Right. I had that experience earlier this year on like my first bait sit.
Right.
It was early. And I was just going out there to do it just because, hey, tis the season, right? I like hearing the birds. I like, even if maybe something comes in, maybe it doesn't, but either way, nothing beats a 9-hour sit out in the woods, right? Like, I mean, it's just calm. And so, but exact same thing. Hiked in there, sweating. Get up in the stand, and you're just like, okay, well, this is where I'm at.
Because early season sits can be cold.
Having your snacks, and you start throwing layers on as you're sitting there. And you're not even really worried about it. You got thermocell going, sounds of nature. It's all great. Get out of the stand, climb down. Dude, like immediately, I'm just, start shaking and start shivering, and it hit me immediately how cold I actually was. I didn't even know it. I was just hanging out.
That happens to me so much between like calling and all the other stuff that I do.
Dude, yeah.
Sweating in gear, and it's funny, like I got that bear the other night. Dude, I was freezing and didn't even know it, because you got to think from like shot to like rolling out of there.
Yeah.
And I had like shed gear to go find that thing. And I was so pumped I didn't even realize how cold I was.
Yeah.
And whatever. It's not life threatening, but it's just a testament to how that can happen without you being aware of it,
and where it can get life threatening. What did we figure out, Mo? There was an episode a long time ago. We figured out the difference was between air and water, and how like many times more water sucks the heat away from your body. Wasn't it like 20?
We looked at it, it was like
times or something.
Yeah,
it was like 20 times faster.
Significant.
If you fall in the water, how fast it zaps that heat out of your system compared to just being in cold air.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was crazy.
I mean, even you want to play with this, like in a controlled setting, like you can go down to like Tanana Lakes, and like my kid, I love that. My wife takes him down there, and he'll and he'll get in that water, but it's good because it gives him a little respect, right?
Oh, sure.
He can associate some like sensation with what that water has to offer, right?
Yeah.
Have a little bit of respect for that stuff.
Yeah.
And you can go check that out. And it's cold. I mean, water does not warm up very much in Alaska. It just doesn't have the time.
Well, and the thing is too, like, don't like wade out there. I think they've got those docks down there now, don't they? Do they have docks built at those? I know that at the smaller lake they do. I don't know if the bigger lake down
At Tannerall Lake?
Yeah. I haven't really gone back there
I
since
think they might have some stuff. I know that they're always kind of doing stuff there.
That was my old stomping ground back in the day, but once it became civilized,
mine too, before it was like public.
Yeah. Back when it was wild and free.
Yeah. I think it's good what they did with that down there. Yeah. I did a lot of growing down in that area.
A lot of my younger life stories are back in that area.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us can.
We may have even bumped into each other before we knew. But yeah, no, that would be a great. Just dive in.
Yeah,
expose yourself immediately because that's how it's going to be.
And maybe take your kids. Like, I think that's a good thing for kids too. So they kind of they can make that association too.
Yeah,
because kids don't know, and they get that shock, and it just gives them a little respect for different bodies of water.
Yeah, and just for a lot of people that listen to the show that are newer to the state, we've got a lot of GIs coming up here from all over the country, and I mean, where I come from in Kansas, you're not going to be on the river in Wichita. It's, but like, lakes around, where I grew up in southeastern Kansas, I mean, they're not cold, you can go out there and swim and, you get out and it's 95 degrees outside or hotter and it's not a thing. Not that way in Alaska. I think and if you don't have that association, you might not even know what kind of danger you're in, which that's the most dangerous situation to be in.
Yeah, I think and you see that a lot too with like guys. One of the most common ones I see when I'm doing like summer stuff around water is you see people go buy a inflatable raft or something. And they just,
like $100 one from
whatever, even an expensive one. You get a bunch of guys. I've seen guys chip in on stuff, and you're just like, dude, these guys have no idea what they're subjecting themselves to.
Mm-hmm.
And it, Google it. It's no joke. But I think the biggest thing is tie off. I don't think we really covered that much, but
go for it.
And you guys know this, but like tie off,
Mm-hmm.
tie off every chance you get.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be hanging around not being tied off. There's just no need. In fact, like some of those bigger like commercial charter outfits that will run you around, those transport outfits, they'll drop you off on like rocks and stuff. And there's anchors on those rocks.
Yeah.
That you can actually like clip into and stuff like that. So and they push that. That's a big deal. You get on those rocks and
absolutely it is.
So yeah, tying off, wear life vest, and that's the thing too. If you hit your head and go out and go in the water and you don't have a life vest on, it doesn't matter how cool you were conscious, right? So,
right.
So
well, and the thing with life vests that I mean, it took me. I had to learn this lesson because I hated life vests for the longest time. I mean, they're just uncomfortable. They're big. They're bulky. And they're too tight or this, that, the other, whatever. There's so many different styles. Like, my wife hails from Michigan. She's from a big sailing family, spent her entire childhood on water and around water. And, it's like, so she really opened my eyes, like how many different kinds of.
Teaches people how to swim.
Yeah. And like she's legitimately like a water person, which is, I grew up as far away from any ocean as you can possibly get. So I'm totally the opposite. But yeah, I mean, there's ones that inflate when you hit water that are completely out of your way until you get wet. So as long as you plan on keeping your upper body out of the water, they're out of the way. They're lightweight. They're not bulky. There's ones that are designed to fit over gear better rather than just being on a bare upper torso. There's ones you can look at and find specialized ones.
Yeah, you can get raincoats.
Float coats.
Yeah, exactly. A float coat. It's a raincoat. It's your rubber rain gear, but it also has either self-inflating or you can pull a string when you if you need it, right?
Yep,
It
absolutely.
kind of goes back to like some of those that you deploy, you just got to keep in mind, they're convenient, they fit well, they're low profile. If you hit your head or you get in an accident or something, you're on a like watercraft or something, you're not going to be just to deploy that
it's
thing.
all about
And-
risk and what are you willing to take.
And like in my boat now, I have 2 different life vests. I have one that goes over like all my cold gear.
Mhm.
I've got one that like if I'm in my t-shirt, right? And I fought this battle with myself for so long. You know, I've gotten a lot of my boat experience running around with Carlito.
Mhm.
And that dude is always in a life vest. Well, me too now. And I used to just think, man, that is so ridiculous. He's always in a life vest. The minute anything we do, he's in a life vest. And he's like, dude, you never know. And that's that shock factor too. You go into that cold water, maybe you're a strong swimmer, maybe you're this, maybe that. You go into that cold water, you have that shock factor. You're not going to be 100% physically.
Yeah.
You sustain an injury before you go into the water. Alaska's different.
Yeah.
Alaska's different.
Right.
So I live in that life vest. Secondary to that, it's usually pretty cold on the boat,
Mhm.
and it does offer some pretty good insulative value.
That is true.
You know? And I did the whole thing. I like to carry my gun on my chest and a
Mhm.
chest rig. Well, now I have a mid-draw holster. My gun goes on my hip when I'm in the boat.
Mhm.
I don't even play that game.
Yep.
You know, like wear your life vest.
Yeah.
Everything comes down to that.
Which, and for anybody wondering why we're harping on this so much in this episode, and we've harped on this before on other episodes too. Every single year, Alaska's waterways take more lives and more injuries than is needed. Honestly, I don't know the statistics, but I know it's got to be one of, if not the highest means of people, losing their lives to Alaska.
Lakes, ponds, all the time.
I was gonna say, because our lakes are big too. Like, and we're not just talking about running water here, but the Copper River. Every year you hear stories. The Tanana, the Yukon, even smaller river systems. It's every single year. There's people that go missing. There's people who capsize. There's people who don't have the equipment they need and they never get found.
So what state where the most people drown is?
Where's that?
Go figure.
It's Alaska. Probably because we have so much water.
There's a reason we talk about this. It's because and it's a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. Nobody's saying don't go do this, but just know what you're getting into. Know the risks. Be knowledgeable about it. Go out there, have fun, come home safe.
I know people, they're rod and reel because of this.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm not even, and you know what? And I respect that.
Sure. 100%.
This is it's not for everyone.
Yep. But there's ways to do it that are safer than others.
And like something else I'll say too, just in the difference of, and the river's going to do what it wants with you, right? And all circumstances are different, but like you've got that personal use that's below the bridge, a little more populated.
Mm-hmm.
You got charter boats running. There's just more human activity in general, right? You start going above the bridge, it gets very isolated very fast.
Yeah.
So you go in the water, some of that stuff, you got spotty cell service.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one around. You go in, you're going to take a ride.
Yeah.
Like,
even with a float coat.
yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I was telling you earlier, I worked for a guy and we were having a conversation about this. I was like, I've never met anybody that's fallen in the copper. And he's like, well, you're looking at one. I was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, right. And he had his kids there, people there helping on it at his house. And everyone's like, yeah, he went in. And I think he said he got carried like, a little over a half mile before he was able to get like pulled out.
Oh, sure.
And he said it was rough. He was able to get like shed some gear.
Mm-hmm.
He got his stuff off, but
yeah.
And this dude was pretty fit for an older dude. Definitely like tough as nails. And I mean, there's different people, different calibers of individuals, different tolerances. So,
well, and I love the way you put it earlier. If you get injured or go unconscious, it doesn't matter how cool you were when you were awake.
No.
I'm going to use that one going forward. That's a good saying.
Well, it applies to many different things.
Really
Some not appropriate for this context.
I agree.
Speaking of life vests, ever been on a boat like a 16-foot Zodiac that keeps losing air and like 6-foot rollers?
No, I haven't.
No?
No, I can't say I have.
I can't remember. It may have been more like 4-foot rollers, but it seemed like 6 foot when you can't keep air in it because the temperature drops and then it's like, it may not even be leaking, but
right. Yeah, I have heard many tales of people taking Zodiacs on the ocean, and I've never actually ventured to try it.
It's a blast.
Myself.
It's an absolute blast.
I'm not saying I wouldn't try it, but I've never had the opportunity, and I've never really sought out the opportunity. But
something I was going to mention is, so there's a laundry list of outfits that'll transport you on the lower portion of the river, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one guy that we like to use, there's Jeremy with Salmon Grove, and they're on the Clutina, and there's a cool little campground there. It's a little family-run operation. They are awesome, super patient, way above and beyond service-wise. They're absolutely phenomenal. Little family-run operation. Him and his wife, their kid, he's running around fishing, and it's a cool environment. Good employees. You can tell everyone's happy. It's a nice place to be. Yeah. Nice place to spend your loot.
Sure.
But they are really good with like, I know sometimes we've been in a pinch like fish cleaning, and he's got a Solar. He does some transport stuff, and his pricing's really fair.
Okay.
So figured I'd mention that. You're pretty limited on access above bridge.
Yeah.
And they offer like some overnight options for like staying out on the river.
Perfect.
If that's something you want to do.
It's good that they allow motorized access into the subsistence area. That's good.
Yeah, and he really kind of runs like a one of a kind outfit. And he'll keep his phone on at night and stuff. He's brought us silly stuff. He's like we've checked and been like, hey Jeremy, man, you awake? I'm just sitting here, just enjoying the summer weather. What do you guys do? You guys getting fish? Well, we just broke a net, and he'll okay, cool. I'll see you guys in a few. And I'm not saying he's going to offer this for everyone, and I'm sure he's been very, very accommodating. But that's who we like to use him. His prices are really good and brought us gear. Or if you want to pull out early, you limit out, and it's still early enough, and he hasn't hit the hay. You basically have pretty much full time access to him. You have an emergency. Awesome. He offers a really, really, really quality service. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah,
because that can be a little difficult. You want to start like once you start kind of traversing above where it's a little more popular, your options can get kind of, there's some walk-in opportunity, and I'm not going to bust that here. We don't do that.
Right.
You can figure it out. It's pretty apparent. There's some solo stuff you can do unguided or without transport, but that's what we like to do. They got a nice cleaning station there. They're right on the Clutina, which the Clutina is swift too. I think it's like the second most swift river in Alaska.
Really?
Yeah, and it might be next to the Copper.
Wow.
A lot of people succumb to that river too.
Right.
But they're about a mile upriver from the mouth of the confluence to the Copper.
I'll say, is that the one you pull off like right by before Pippin Lake on the way down?
No,
to get into that one.
So this is Copper Center.
Copper Center. Okay. Yeah.
And it's kind of cool. It kind of offers up its kind of own set of opportunities. There's a little gas station over there. Jeremy's got kind of everything on site too. It's kind of a one-stop shop. You could pretty much show up there empty-handed and you're going to have a good time. But, and then there's like the little cafe there. They used to have the Copper Center Lodge. It burned down, which is a super bummer.
Yeah.
Because that used to be a great place to go get food. You get breakfast, dinner. I don't know if they're trying to kind of reestablish something there now, but
I would assume
it's kind of a different spin on the dip netting experience going that direction. And you do have like, as opposed to like a one king limit, and we've always gotten like a king and called it, but you got opportunity to retain 5 kings depending on what the closures look like or what you're legally allowed to do for that season. But
well, that's cool.
And then the fish are a little higher up too later season, right? Because that's a little bit further up. So it just offers a different opportunity.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I mean,
no, and honestly, is that above the bridge? I mean, is that something that, if you are a resident, you can that's an option for you, or is there like more requirements?
No, that's they're both. So the personal use and the subsistence use are resident only. And they pretty much follow the same criteria. Your bag limit's just a little bigger. I mean, it's significantly larger on the subsistence side,
right? But harder access, and
it's harder access,
yeah.
and it can be rough. I've seen it where people are catching fish in the canyon, and no one's catching fish on the subsistence permit.
Right.
I've been that guy, and I will say it's hard to sit there and watch everyone catch fish, and you know that you're not you don't have dibs on that, right?
Yeah,
because you made your decision. But if you wait it out a little later in the season, it does seem to get much better. I like using those guys too, because usually about that time, a lot of the tourism has died down. We get into late July, August, people are shifting gears. They're doing other stuff. And I've seen it where that campground's dead and the fishing is hot. Another cool thing about going through those guys is so you can base camp out of Salmon Grove there, and you can do your dip netting thing, but there's rod and reel opportunity.
Oh, awesome.
And right about that time that everything's tapering off, the reds are running really hard in the Clutina.
Good.
And you can
just
camp
shift
out.
gears. Yeah.
You don't have to sleep out on the river if you don't want to. Like if the weather's weird or whatever, that's not your thing. Shift gears and do some rod and reel fishing too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I remember we came back in with limits one day. He brought us back in to the truck, and people were just slaying them right there in the campground. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. There's not a lot of places you can do that.
Yeah. Well, and one thing too with, we've talked a lot about using a boat or using a charter service to kind of go out and either limit your fish, and maybe you don't mind paying the money and you just decide to do that every year because it gives you a better success rate, and that's perfectly fine. And honestly, supporting those local economies down there is a great thing to do. You know, especially if you want to go down there, throw a little bit of coin at these people. They'll set you up in a great spot. But it is something, and this is just something to keep in mind, Alaska books out quickly.
Yeah.
In fact, by the time you're hearing this episode, if you haven't booked your trip yet, get ready for some disappointment, because you're probably going to make some phone calls and be like, not have all of the dates on the calendar that you might want available to you, right? So it is one of those things where you've kind of, I think most of them say they start accepting reservations in March is when they start actually answering the phones and taking reservations. And for this year, if you've never been down before and you just want to go check it out and use a service, maybe take what you can get. If they have an opportunity on a Thursday and you've got to take some leave time to go down there, do it. Go have fun. But then you'll know for next year, if that's what you want to do again, okay, March comes around, I have to pick my date. I have to call and make sure I have that set up, because Alaska books out quickly, and anything here does.
Real estate's limited too.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like high water there again, like with the above the bridge thing, I've seen that get busy too. Right. Because and your shore access is just so limited that it can get very crowded. And you got to remember too, there's people that run like their own boats and different stuff, and you'll kind of plan that out. You'll get out there and it's packed. Everyone's usually pretty cool. And if the fishing's hot, you got to think too, people are limiting out. They're going up on the bank, kicking back. Right. And you're going to get your chance to fish.
Sure. Yeah.
If everyone's not winning, you're probably not going to win either. But it's patience and
yeah. And again, it's kind of like we've talked about, when you get a ton of caribou hunters up in 40 Mile country, right? Like everybody plays nice and everybody has a good time,
generally.
Same thing with, fishing. When you're down there in combat fishing areas, where you're shoulder to shoulder or close to, if you're not being that guy that's just rude to everybody, and you're probably going to have a pretty good experience.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be crowded. It might not be the tranquil wilderness experience you want, but you're going to get your fish probably if the fishing's good, and just don't be that guy. That's
people are pretty neighborly too.
Yeah.
I have on the old Insta there. We had a guy landed right on the beach there in a cup, and he was super cool. He lands, parks like, I don't know, 300 yards away, and he comes down. He's like, "Can I join you guys?" I'm like, "Dude, the way you just rolled in here," I'm like, "Come on, man." I'm like, "You need some help carrying stuff?" Like, he's so cool, super cool dude. But everybody knows what's up. We're all trying to get a piece of this. So
absolutely, yeah.
People are pretty cool for the most part, I think.
For sure. Before we carry on, what would you say are some rules and regs to keep in mind? I've got one in mind, but things that can get you hung up easily.
Rules and regs, I mean,
obviously, most of them you want to go to a fishing game.
Kind of coming back to like the equipment side of things, you don't want to be wrestling fish in a already kind of sketchy country like that. And you stringer or a piece of rope. I would carry a fish club. If you're old school, if you're rugged, a lot of people pick a rock up, but you want to give your fish a bump and knock them out. It makes them a little easier to manage because you got to think stuff's slippery. You don't want to be dabbling with stuff longer than you need to in these conditions, right? You want to, and you're hustling. So you want to get your fish dead, get them on the stringer, and get your net back in the water. That's the objective here.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'd say carry couple lengths of rope for yourself and your fish. And then I would carry like some kitchen shears because one of the regs is that you need to clip fins.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for like data collecting purposes. And Fish and Game offers up a really good description here of like what they expect. I'm trying to figure out what these fins are. Tail fins. So you need to clip top and bottom tail fins is what the requirement is.
And they've got a nice picture there, a nice diagram.
On location.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I've heard a lot of different conflicting takes on this. You kind of get in a rhythm. You're getting fish. Keep track of how many fish you're bagging because there's times it's just been on fire. You'll get 6 fish a dip.
Yeah,
I've had where we've got a king in there and 4 reds. I mean, and we're talking it's on fire. You start clubbing fish and you're excited. The adrenaline's rolling. Everyone's having a good time. You can exceed limits real quick.
Yeah,
and then you got a problem, right?
Yeah,
and these are all requirements. So when you clip those fins, that's supposed to be done on site where that fish was harvested, not down the bank.
Yeah.
Not down the bank, not at the boat ramp,
not at the parking lot.
Nope, you do it right there, and before you put them on a stringer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because that's a big thing. I've seen people get hemmed up for this. Is they got fish on stringers, they got carried away, they're having a good time. Fins aren't clipped. That's a violation, right? And then another thing I'll do is every so often is I'll do a quick count. And I'll get that written down on my harvest report because you're supposed to write down on that. So you want to carry a pen with you.
Yeah. That's what all those
in a
lines
freezer bag.
On the bottom of your
Yup. And you're supposed to log your harvest. And that's a huge deal. There again, people will do that at the boat ramp. They'll do that at the truck. You didn't do it in the field. I mean, you're in violation, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen the troopers sit there and you know what? I respect them for it. That's them doing their job big time is regulating that. I mean, because people take advantage of this resource.
Oh, sure. Well, and you hear stories about that all the time from guys that spend a lot of time down there.
Mm-hmm.
Like people will come back and they'll drop fish off at the truck or hand it off to somebody else's truck and then go back in and now they're taking over their limit. And it's the rules are the way they are for a reason.
Yeah, and that kind of potentially has a place in all this back and forth about what's going on with our salmon fisheries, right?
Exactly.
And we just don't need to contribute to any of this negatively.
Yep.
So that's what I would say. It's like some good utilitarian style scissors to clip those fins.
I was going to ask how you did it. Clip the tail. How do you do it? Just scissors?
Yeah, my wife had a really nice set of kitchen shears that worked well for this, so they're in the cure bag now.
So what we always did was we just hold the fish up by the gills, take a fillet knife and just swing that at the right turn.
Well,
snap.
As long as you don't
boom, boom.
ninja yourself, right?
I've had hundreds and hundreds of fish that way, not many more, not thousands.
Everybody might not be as cool as you are. Conscious. I think I would refrain from the knife swinging method and just carry. And so you can carry a carabiner, 550 cord, tie them off, and that's usually I do. I got my club on my hip, my shears on my hip.
I mean, another thing that works good is those set of those little branch shears.
Those are great.
Those
Oh
are good.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Well,
And
Nippers.
honestly, those might even work. I've never tried that, but I would assume those would probably maybe even work a little better than the
Maybe,
shears.
yeah.
They're a
Mhm.
little tougher and sharper.
Mhm.
yeah,
And you're going to be cutting some tail fins for sure.
yeah.
There's not really a lot to it other than following. Make sure that you log. Just keep up with what you're doing. We got close one year.
Mhm.
We were on the below bridge side. I got close. And I like caught myself. It's like, whoa. I was like 2 fish out and we were piling them up. And I mean, it's really easy to do.
Yeah.
And just stop every once in a while, pull your pin out, your fish. And there's a ton of slots on there.
Yeah.
You could stop and log what you got.
Well, and a lot of that's set up because if you take a commercial charter out for deep sea fishing, you're supposed to do the same thing, because you're only allowed you're
Right.
I think they actually changed this rule a couple of years back, but back in the day when I was going out, you were only allowed 2 charters per year to go out on a commercial. So you could only go get 4 halibut per year because it's 2 a day, 2 charters per person. So I believe they've changed that. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I heard that was changed. But so there's plenty of slots for your deep sea fish, for your salmon, for everything. I mean, now once you get up into like the subsistence side where you might need a second page for that.
And these permits are their own. These are like resource specific. So like your dip netting permit is going to be something that's completely separate of any of those other like harvest tickets.
That's true.
They're even like location specific, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah, they are. And that's the biggest thing. Is just keep up. It's so easy to lose track.
Yeah. The one reg that I will warn people about, that I've heard people getting really hemmed up on without knowing about it because it is kind of obvious, but it might not seem obvious, is, as you'd pointed out, these are resident only opportunities for dip netting, either one of them. What that means in the eyes of the state is that non-residents cannot take part in any part of this process. So that's not just holding the dip net and dragging them to shore. That's filleting of the fish. That's the cutting of the fins. That's the getting them back to the truck. If you have a non-resident friend and you want to say, hey man, come down here and let's do this. And you can't fish, but you can see the experience.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard so many stories of people getting to the trucks and troopers checking residency. And if one guy's carrying a stringer of fish up to the truck and he's not a resident, you're going to get in trouble.
Okay, I could see that, but you're saying like filleting fish. So let's say I've got fish, tails nipped, they're recorded. I'm back at camp filleting fish, or my non-resident friend can't cut them up with me.
He cannot help you.
Legally, I could give them to him. They're harvested.
Sure. But I've heard people filleting fish in their truck bed, like taking home, like they're just filleting them out before they go home, having their friend help them out and getting in trouble for it. And that's where I'm saying it's something you wouldn't think of, right? Because it's a legal animal you have harvested as the resident. You've clipped the tails. You've gotten it back to camp.
Yeah.
But I believe it has something to do with the way the regs are worded, how it's once you get the fish back to where it's processed for human consumption, at that point you can kind of do whatever you want with it. But even for the below the bridge version,
they're very adamant about
personal
this.
use and subsistence are very close to the same. I mean, like sport fishing might be a bit different.
Yeah. But yeah, for the dip netting in particular, that is one I've heard people where they least expected to get in trouble, where they get hemmed up.
Well, and this is like something to kind of lead off what you just said, James, is using a reputable outfit, somebody that's legally capable of facilitating clients and transportation and game.
Sure.
Because I have encountered along the way where with some of these tough to access places, you've got it's pretty busy. Real estate's limited, right? It's a busy time. You'll run into a local that snowbirds. We had this happen. And he's like, yeah, well, I'll take you guys up. And we thought nothing of it. We're like, sweet, for like a fraction of what they were charging, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting like dialed in, we're getting geared up. And like that whole like small town, like this other dude comes up to us and he's like, hey, are you guys going to go out with him? And we're like, yeah, man. And he's like, hey, just so you guys know, that dude is not a resident. And we're like, what? And he's like, nope, he is not a resident. He just and we didn't even know what he was talking about. We didn't even get it. We're like, what? And I think I made a phone call to a buddy of mine, and he was like, dude, bad gig. And he was like, that dude handling your fish, your equipment, transporting you guys, all that stuff. He's like, you got it. There's weird gray areas. And I don't know what those are enough to quote that. It's easy enough to follow the rules. Just follow the rules. Yeah. It goes with everything. Yeah. I mean, Alaska game laws make it so easy for us to succeed. If you can't succeed in Alaska, you're not going to succeed anywhere. You're a moron. Like, I'm sorry, but I mean, they set us up so good for success.
They do.
Yeah. And all these requirements are super reasonable. There's nothing, when I read through this stuff, I don't see anything here where I'm like, oh dude, that's just really, come on, Alaska. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yep.
Like, just follow the rules.
Yeah. This whole state really does offer so many great opportunities, but there's a few things that might not be immediately at the forefront of your mind. One of those being, like, even how you'd put it, even if those fish are back at the truck, they're not fair game yet. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind, your transport. That's one I had never even thought of. That's a really good point.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's some of these people they don't have any business. I mean, and there's a lot of people that they don't claim residency here.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it's not worth it. Whatever perks they're getting, whatever state they adhere to, residency wise, they're they're not following the rules and whatever. But
yeah,
and usually the troopers don't isolate fines to certain parts of the group. I mean, it's everybody gets hemmed up when it goes down. So
military grade punishment.
Yeah, right. One jelly donut.
Well, you had teased with one of your experiences earlier. There is one other way that you can get fish with a net in Alaska as a resident. And this is the way you've done it the most, Mo.
Yep.
Growing up.
Yeah, I have actually not dip netted in my entire life, which is crazy being an Alaska resident. But
but it doesn't mean you didn't fish.
No.
It just means you fish differently.
It doesn't mean I haven't subsistence fished.
There you go. So why don't you talk a little bit, because I have no knowledge of what you're about to talk about. And I've heard you tease the story several times on different episodes and different events, even earlier in this episode. So
the other kind of netting in Alaska is gill netting, right? And I mean, you've got seine netting and drift gill netting and set gill netting. And if you read through the regulations, they're all listed depending on where you're at and what you're doing. And there are rivers, like as a subsistence gill net, you can gill net on the Yukon. I've never done it. I've known people to do it. Apparently they didn't like how many pike they caught because you're not allowed to keep the pike in the gill net. Like they were catching tons of pike. They're like, if we could gill net for pike, like we would literally load our freezer with pike.
Right.
Which I think that would be cool if like that was opened up to some extent, right? But
yeah,
you have a bunch of people up there gill netting on the Yukon. People who've never done it before just because this is cool. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, so what we did, we always went down southern Alaska, down there, Kenai area. And I mean, there's all different options all over the state. Like I said, you can almost, there's all places all over the coast. You can do it off the north coast of Alaska and like up in the villages.
Sure.
There's a gill net up there.
Yeah. I heard a lot about it.
There's salmon runs up there too. You know, it seems crazy, like thousands of miles away, but there are. And there's two primary ways to do it. And one is to set off the bank. So in the area we did it was, when I say we did, I haven't done it with my parents for several years. I just haven't had time, right?
Mm-hmm. But you're an adult with a family of your own now. So.
Right. I've wanted to go, and now like the last year or two is like, oh yeah, I think we're going to try to go. Especially this year, I've got a bear. Maybe we'll go, and then it's shut down. So But anyway, there's 20 plus foot tides most of the time.
Yeah.
So, what you do, whether you're setting with a boat or off the shore, is the guys. It's like 100 people camped right on the shore, right in this area where you can in this inlet, and so you'll have 100 plus nets just run off the shore, basically as far out as they can walk. Right, you can't set a net in the channel.
Gotcha.
Right, but you can set on the, so if you've been down south, you've seen the mud flats down there.
Oh yeah.
And then sometimes some places they just go out for miles because you got these 20-foot tides. And you can't net in the fresh water a lot of times.
I was gonna say, are those dramatic tides? Like, is that like a normal thing on the coast? Because I grew up in Kansas. Like you're from California.
We
Chris.
have pretty like dramatic tides here.
Is
in
it like
Alaska.
20 feet ish, like on the ocean? Like pretty standard? Is that?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I think we have some really extreme tides here. I'm no expert on that, but I definitely. I think I've read some stuff that it like next to other places. They're drastically higher.
Because I know where we were deer hunting down in Southeast. I mean, even that, like from the high tide to the low tide. I mean, the areas would change.
Yeah, but
entirely.
But those are 10 and 11 feet.
Right. So then you're thinking like 20, 25
right.
feet. It's like, holy.
And a lot of times they're not even they're not even 10 and 11 feet. There's high points of the season too, right? It goes from a high to a low.
Sure.
But with that 20-foot, and I think, I can't remember what the most, I know we were seeing 20 plus feet tides.
That's so crazy.
And, twice a day.
Yeah.
Right. That's a lot of water.
Yeah.
But anyway, so tide goes out. If your bait's netting off the bank, and we never did this, but if you're netting off the bank, you just pick a point to anchor to the bank. And you can anchor it with sandbags. You can get these little anchors. You can just stick a piece of rebar in it. It's got a hole on one side and it's got fins on it. You just drive it down into the mud. It's got a cable on it. You tug up on that cable and it's locked in. It's actually amazing what these things will take. Or you can use sandbags. Sandbags don't work as well. They don't last as long. They get torn apart. A riptide will pull them right out with that much water moving.
I can only imagine.
Guys, you anchor at the bank and you run it out onto the mud flats. You run your net out. There's limits on length and stuff. I think there's like 50 fathoms in length.
Okay.
Don't ask me how long that is. I don't remember.
Somebody knows though.
But I don't remember all of that right now. But you run your net out, and there's a limit on weight or on how far apart they can be, like top to bottom. How many? I can't remember what they call it. How many knots or whatever. There's limits on size. Knots. Like I think the area we were in was like 6 inches. And you run it out. Say it's 100 feet. You run out and you set a buoy and another anchor, right?
Okay.
Or maybe the sandbags or whatever, because you will check your net either as the tide's going out or you'll pull it in when the tide starts to go out, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
And it kind of will blow your mind. Like you'll have these nets set sometimes 20 feet apart, these nets, maybe not always that close, but 20 yards, 20 feet. And, they're just wherever people decide to set them. And these people some of them catching, like they're pulling in like 40 fish.
Wow.
Right. And it's pretty similar. I think it's 25 per household. It's similar subsistence regulations. But and on a good day, like 3 or 4 families can run several nets. I think it's 1 net per family. I don't remember, but run several nets in like a good day. Everybody limit out in that day. And you're talking 300 or 400 fish sometimes, depending on how many people you got there. And that's a really good day. There are times you go down there and in a week you catch 50, right? Better than people might have been doing at Chitina that same week.
Right.
But, but it also may not be at all. People Chitina may have limited out in a day too. It where you're at and how you're working and everything. And in a lot of these areas you can go gill net too. Or not gill net, dip net.
Okay. Yeah.
Like there's a dip netting season that's longer. These are the places you talk about combat fishing where if you catch a fish, you step out of line.
Yeah.
And it,
and you're waiting to get back in.
And you're waiting to get back in. Right.
That's what I'll say, like last summer, and I'm going to fish down there for the first time this year actually, but I've seen pictures and videos of like the vehicles being backed up trying to even get into these areas.
And I've talked to people and they say, well, go at the right time. It's not that bad. And all that. And like, and I guess if you live down there, it's probably not that big of a deal to like run down there for a day.
You can get in there, but it's the same thing. Time is everything.
Right.
And weekdays generally, and I mean, that's going to cut a lot of your activity. It's not, and you'd be surprised. It'll look like a Saturday there on a Wednesday.
Time limited, like day, like you got to have your nets, can't have your nets in the water till say 6 a.m. You got to pull them out by 6 p.m.
Like dip netting?
Yeah.
I can't.
I'm
say
not
I've
sure.
ever
I
heard
don't
of
think
that.
so because
So
I mean
that'll
people
actually
dip net like all night and
change
stuff.
season to season, day to day, even with the emergency order stuff. They'll change that. They'll like there's a
Gotcha.
certain amount of time. Sometimes you cannot have your net in the water.
Yeah.
Like you can't leave your net in the water overnight or anything like that. With the gill net specifically, and I think the dip netting thing in those areas, I think it's a lot more the ocean and the tides, and they want enough fish to get into the river, right?
Right. Of course.
Even though you're not blocking the channel, but anyway, so we always did it out of a boat. I referenced the Zodiac, the 16-foot Zodiac that wasn't holding air. You know, and that happens. You can take a boat that's warm, or it's just whatever the ambient temperature is. You fill it up with air, you stick it on the water, it's going to lose air.
Yeah,
or it's good. That pressure will drop, and that thing.
Water's cold, air is warm. You're getting a bunch of different things.
Same
there.
thing that happens to our truck tires here in the wintertime.
Right, and then even then, you fill that thing all the way up, and then you get out there, and it gets overcast. The storm blows in, and now it's colder. Same thing.
So bring your air pump with you.
Yes. Yep. I have both been the boat driver in that situation with my dad and his buddy hanging on to the front of the boat, trying not to be sick as we're just chopping over those. It's just that thing's just dropping and like
that's all I could think of the whole time. I mean, I've been out on some big boats and still got seasick.
And and I've been the driver of the boat in that situation. I've also been the guy sitting there just pumping away the whole time, going back in.
Yeah.
And it sounds worse than it is, right? Like you're going to get. I actually haven't known anybody in that area to fall out, right? If you fall out in that kind of thing, most of the time the winds are blowing to shore, right? The waves are going to shore. It's going to suck, but you're going to end up on shore.
Sure.
You're not getting sucked out.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. I know. This isn't like, this is it's a lot safer than that was like one time or 1 week when it was really bad like that.
Right.
But you go out in the boat, first few times we did it, we tried the sandbag thing. You get nets just ripped out with a riptide or something like that.
Yeah.
And, or a bunch of fish in it. And there's a lot of fish when you come up to your net and the buoy's underwater.
Right.
But, brief thing of how the net's designed is you've got a rope on the top, rope on the bottom, right? Rope on the bottom's weighted. It's got a lead weight inside the rope, weaved into the rope.
Okay.
Lead core,
correct. With the rope on the top, has floats on it to keep it at the top of the water. And then you got, a buoy on each end of the net, and then running down with rope, depending on, you try to set based on tide height. Right.
Yep.
So if you think you have a 20-foot high and you're 2 foot out of the water, it's okay for it to be a little longer, right? Because you want it to be at the top of the water.
Sure. Yeah. How long are these nets typically?
Like 100 feet, maybe.
Okay.
It seems about
good
right.
size.
I don't remember what a fathom is. Like I said, 50 fathoms.
Seems like a lot to manage if you're not.
Well, so a fathom, I looked it up while you were talking. I might have missed a couple details here, but so it looks like a fathom is 6 feet.
2 yards.
So
2 yards.
So 50 fathoms would be about 300 feet.
Okay. I don't know if we ever ran nets that long. Oh, we may have. I don't remember.
Okay.
It's been several years since I did it. But basically you've got, say, a big Rubbermaid, big tote, and your net's inside there, and you'll go out on the mud flat, set your anchors with your rope, your buoy.
Yeah.
And then you just pull that net that's coiled into that thing, and you'll just hook it up to one end. You'll drag it across the mud, hook it up to the other end, stretch it out in the whatever, for the directions of the tide to come in, pick it up.
And you're anchoring both sides of the net.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and you'll usually leave your anchors and buoys until you're done.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of the time too, you can't get those duck bills back out of the ground.
You shovel them out.
Yeah.
I know guys that'll like reuse them year after year.
Yeah.
Which seems like a little much work because they don't cost all that much money. But hey, good for them, right? And they rust out too, or they'll shovel them out, like reuse that aluminum one, but like the cable rusts and all that because it's steel cable. But you do that, and you show up, and so then you come back usually mid or while the tide's on the way out towards the end. You come back out with a boat and to pick the net, right?
Yeah.
And so the boat driver has one job, that's to get the front of the boat up to the net, so the guy that's leaning over the boat can grab it, get the front of that net pulled. He'll pull the edge of the net up till he gets the weight cord. He'll get it up on the front of the boat, and by this time, the guy running the motor has pulled the motor out of the water, and he just sits there.
And you're just pulling yourself.
And so then usually you got two guys in the front of the boat. One guy's pulling, and they're both just picking fish out of the net, smacking them on the head if they need it, whatever. It seems like we may have even, because you've got these little picks. It's like a handle with a pistol grip almost. with a little steel hook that comes off of it, a little straight steel hook. And you use that to grab around the net and just work it off the fish.
Oh,
and so
okay.
you're just doing that as fast as you can, tossing fish into the boat.
Yeah.
And you've got an exceptionally troubled fish, you can use that hook to rub it in an eye or something and take care of a problem, right? When they're flopping around and kicking you and your tails are cutting your waders or whatever nonsense.
Well, salmon are big fish.
Yeah, yeah.
they're not little fish.
We've caught sharks. You can't keep them thrown back, but you catch sharks,
like salmon sharks.
Catch those stupid little flounders.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are, they're like, size of a dinner plate. And it's really disappointing when you're not doing well and you're like, oh, I can feel a fish in the net, and it's a flounder.
Yeah,
dogfish and stuff, huh?
And I don't know if we've ever caught any dogfish there. It's pretty salmon was pretty much what you catch.
I'm trying to think, like dogfish are like those smaller sharks. They're not salmon sharks, but they're like the kind of the more
okay.
They refer to them as dogfish. I can't think of the technical term. But
what's the rules? Do you know what the rules are on the incidental catch on that? Is it like
so it depends on the regulation?
You're not supposed to get them out of the water. You're supposed to
right. It depends on the regulation of it. If you can take it with a gill net, right?
Sure.
Like I think some of the sharks you are allowed to take and keep.
Okay.
Depending on whether kings are open or not, it's just like okay, one king or whatever it is. Sometimes two kings or not at all. I think it's actually shut down this year because of the king salmon issue.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because it's pretty easy to put a king back. Those kings don't.
What
kill
area is
themselves in
this?
those nets. This is like Kenai area.
Yeah, all that's shut down to kings now.
It is all shut down to kings. I don't know why they're shutting down the fishing for
everything else.
Yeah. Maybe they're just trying to shut down anything they
maybe
feel
to
like
limit
affects.
like incidental catch. Like I don't know.
And that's a good point. I mean,
like,
were a lot of these fish that you'd pull in like still alive and kicking? Like they didn't really kill
if they
themselves.
were caught near
that?
the surface, then seagulls were killing them.
Oh,
a lot of
sure,
you pull a lot of them out missing eyes and stuff like which they did the work for you, right?
Right.
Also, you pull a fish out of a net and you got half of a fish because a seal bit it in half. And
seals got to eat too.
Yeah, they can eat without teeth tearing big old holes in our nets too. Anyway, yeah, I mean it's an absolute blast, right?
Sounds like it.
And
sounds like something I got to try someday.
And
for sure.
I mean, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Except that it's more instead of where Chitna, you go down, and if you're there, you're fishing. It's work until you got your fish. Here, go set a net, and then you sit on the beach for hours.
Right.
And then the work starts, and then you got to go work, right?
Yeah. And then it's balls to the walls.
Now you don't have to. Thankfully, you don't have to clip your tails in the boat, right? They're really good about that. Like you get your fit once your fish are out of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Like being between the boat and the truck is when you need to get the tails clipped, right? And there's guys that'll just fillet them on the spot.
Sure. Yeah.
We gut them at that point. Usually gut them, clean them. Then they go in the cooler back to campground where there's a full setup to fillet and everything. And
yeah, they got the little tables and
right. And there's power if you want to bring
hoses.
along your vac master or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun side of the state too.
It's
very different. Like geographically, it's cool. You get
that's
some
what I love
nice
about
warm
the state.
weather,
It's just
and
everything is so.
gives a different vibe.
Honestly, I love the interior. I do. I've got a lot of love for the interior, but South Central, man, it's beautiful down there. Like just the trees are bigger, the ferns. I mean, it's Valdez,
the Devil's Club
down there on the peninsula. Like, I mean, all of that stuff, dude. It's
the bears are bigger.
Yeah, everything is just so.
Dude, I like
so
going into
beautiful
it's
down
very
there.
touristy, dude. But I love going down into like Homer.
Yeah.
And just getting like fish and chips and just sitting out on the beach and
Oh,
eating
out
fish
there
and
on the
chips.
spit
And like,
and
dude,
like,
it's like there's some like I don't know.
Part of living here is you got to do some touristy stuff every once in a while.
You really do,
Like, you
dude.
just get out and enjoy it. Like, I mean, yeah.
Touristy stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Like what?
Like you said, like.
No, it's funny. I'm born and raised, right? It's weird. I've never been to Valdez. It just wasn't.
What?
My dad's been there, and he's just like, it's all pink salmon. No, their pink salmon aren't any good. Right? You got to know how my dad thinks, too. If it's not like, he's got to have a purpose and a point to be
Sure.
there. Otherwise, it might be 1 o'clock in the morning, but he's packing up and
He
leaving.
sounds
if
like
he's
a
done.
guy I could jive with on some missions.
I think so.
I like that. I like what I
He's
hear
just-
about him.
And this has changed. The first year or two we went down doing the gill net thing, and I was a lot younger, obviously, at the time when we first did it. But like, it was like, we drove down there. We drove all the way from Fairbanks to Kenai with, was it 6 kids did my parents have 6 kids at the time or 5 in a 15 passenger van pulling a pop-up camper? and all the way to Kenai. We get our fit. We do our fishing 2-3 days. We turn around, drive all the way back.
Yep.
What is that, about 9 hours?
Yeah.
That time of year in that setup, it's more like 12.
Depends on how many RVs you get stuck in.
Yeah.
I think one time it took us like 16 and a half hours to get from here to Homer.
Yeah, it can be a long
insane.
drive. I mean,
like
that it's just all depends on what you're driving and.
Well, that Seward Highway can be, just a snail's crawl. I mean, you could.
Especially with road construction.
Yeah,
there usually is.
Between the RVs and the road construction and everything else, I mean, you could be moving at the speed of smell on that highway.
You know, something else I thought about that's kind of like a late thought here is if you're not into if you don't want to do if you don't want to operate under the intensity of like the copper, the Kasilof and Kenai offer great dip netting opportunities.
Yeah.
I don't think they're any better traffic wise or people wise.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a lot mellower environment where you can have kids playing, digging in the bank and tinkering around. And it's a little, I just thought I'd mention that kind of offers up a little bit better like family.
Yeah. And the
situation.
gill netting is easy. And if you live in that area of the state, as most people in the state do, it could, especially if you're down there like in Kenai. Well, at good night, all you got to do is if you have the opportunity to take a few hours off work in the middle of the workday, you actually might not be combat fishing.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Well, and I was going to ask about that. So, you just mentioned, you guys beelining down there, getting your fish and beelining back. But how long do you typically have to be down there to limit out? I mean,
it depends on the year. Like I said, there's times it happens in a day, and there's times in a week.
Really?
Nobody's limited out.
Depends on how they're moving, huh?
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
It's just like anything. And, the guy we were fishing with, I think he'd done it a few years before he invited my dad down. And he's like, I want somebody to do this with. This is a lot of work to do by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And he, I think he said he accidentally set his nets in the channel. First year he did it. And it limited out right away.
Yeah. Weird.
Or either that or lost his nets,
Right.
But... But he didn't
Shall
know.
remain unnamed.
Oh, channel markers, and there's actually signs set up. You can't set your nets in to the river mouth closer than a certain point. They've got to be out. You got to line the signs up and say, okay, we're over here. Apparently, one trooper tried to write somebody up because he was like, oh, the direction the sign's pointing. He didn't realize there was two signs that you had to line up, and one sign was pointing so people could read it, or it was funny. We all have our days, right?
Right. Well, and let me ask you this one too. From doing it for several years, year after year. So you'd mentioned earlier, you don't have the quite the danger of, say, the rushing rivers, right, where you're getting swept away and everything like that. You'll probably just get pushed up to shore, right? Or if you're any kind of a good swimmer,
there's enough boats and people out there, somebody's going to see you bobbing and be like, hey, there's somebody over there. That's not a buoy.
But as far as getting out to anchor those things, there was a story, I think it came out last spring this happened. There was a poor gentleman that went out into those mud flats. I want to say down by Girdwood somewhere. And he ended up getting stuck because if you're out there at the wrong time, obviously it's very muddy, it's very mucky, you can sink. And this is what ended up happening to this guy. And I believe the tide came in and they just weren't able to get out to him to pull him out. Emergency services were on site and everything, and he was just as stuck as you could be up to his waist, and they couldn't get out or they'd get stuck, and there was no, so there are still dangers involved.
There are, yes,
on these tide flats and on these, in these mucky areas.
They just lost someone in Seward a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Out there snagging.
Man.
Somebody got caught in that incoming tide, and
yeah.
I'm not quite sure the details, but somebody drowned.
But so did you guys take any precautions, any steps? Is there certain times you wait until it's drier to go out there or something like that? Or
I hear that mud just holds the water. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, but after several hours, maybe.
No, you don't have really that much time. You've got a short amount of time.
Is it? Okay.
It's not a long period of time.
Snowshoes or something. I don't know.
No, where in the area we were
stuck. Yeah.
In the area we were,
bad ideas here.
Mud was pretty solid. It was pretty solid.
We
never had an issue. We never saw anybody have an issue.
Okay. Yeah.
And we always paid attention. We're conscious of it. We didn't stray far from each other. That way, hopefully, when when you're just wandering out there and then you find that hole and nobody's around, nobody knows how
Sure.
bad it is getting to you or how you got to where you're at.
Right.
When you've got 3 guys out on the mud flats, no more than 100 feet from each other,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Then like, how that guy got there. He walked right along the side of that net.
Well, in some of the areas I've spent some time on the coast, like I go down to Homer a lot, and there's areas where when the tide's out, I've gone exploring down there on the flats and everything. And the areas I've been on, it's a little bit more of a rocky bottom than a mucky, real soft bottom. But and so for some of those areas, it was like not even a concern. You're walking across rocks and stuff like that. And then But for that area down there, I was curious. I've never really spent time on the coast.
So
down
much
there.
of southeast is just rocks.
Like
There's hardly any mud down there.
Right.
And there's a lot of mud, but like I said, we never saw an issue. Like
Seems to hold together.
you could get your feet kind of like, being a dumb kid, just sit there like, I wonder if I can get my feet stuck in the mud,
Of course, yeah.
right? So you sit there, move your boots back and forth, and
Lose
you
your
just,
boot.
like, pop them out. Yeah, right. That's the worst thing that I ever.
It seems like some of that more dangerous mud is like closer to the anchorage side of the inlet.
It
Seems like that's
Yeah.
where you kind of hear more of those bad situations.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
Always something.
honestly, it's really where there's less and less, I think, moving water. Like you get further away from the ocean, right?
Yeah.
It's still the Cook Inlet, but you're farther up into the Cook Inlet. There might still be big tides, but it's probably not as much of a rip tide. I don't know.
Sure.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I've never been in those areas where it's really that.
I know
bad.
like Ship Creek area and stuff, that mud gets like
Yeah.
super dangerous. A lot of those people like they got I think their king season that's either like going right now or about to start, but there's always like warnings.
I'd be
about
surprised
getting
if Ship
stuck
Creek's
in the
even
tide.
open right now. I thought it was all shut down.
Oh, it might be,
I thought
huh?
it was shut down even last year,
Ship Creek?
at least for Kings.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that.
I knew an older
traditionally
guy
it's a popular
Oh,
area.
I know.
And
I
it's-
knew an
and I
older
know
guy
people have
that-
encountered a lot of like
that would
issues
do the
with-
fish derbies and stuff,
Mm.
and like he lived for fishing Ship Creek
I could have sworn I saw some people posting pictures
It-
the other day.
for Kings.
Yeah, but I could be wrong.
I know. I think he was catching.
I follow that
they
Ship
catch.
Creek.
They don't just catch kings out of there, obviously.
I
but-
think right now that's all that would be running in
Huh.
there.
Yeah, I don't
Mhm.
know. I know a guy that like lived for fishing at Fish Creek, and when I heard they were shutting it down one year, or was it last year? So they shut something down, and I thought, that poor guy, what's he gonna do?
It's so
Yeah.
fun. It's so fun. That's the crazy side of Alaska is like for as remote as we can get, you next thing you know, you're like without giving it too much description, you're sitting there kingfishing and you're like, this is a really odd place to catch an Alaskan king salmon.
Yeah,
Like
I mean-
big shipping yard and like there's some activity going on around there that's rather
but-
questionable and a
Wild
rougher
caught
side of
Alaskan king.
where does Ship Creek go through? What does Ship Creek flow right through?
Anchorage.
People
Yeah.
fish in the middle of the city.
I'm pretty sure I saw people
I mean,
fishing
and
there
it is-
last year.
And
It's
good fishing.
it's rough.
Yeah.
It's a rough area.
But I mean, it's
Yeah, oh, yeah.
depending on where you're at, it can be. You can find some somewhat secluded areas on it too. There's some areas that
I had
aren't
a
so-
buddy that lived down there one year. He's going to college. Dude,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was so cool. It was so convenient just to like drop in there and
Yeah.
fish and
And we
like
like
have
to-
a place to rack
We
out.
like to call those people, at least I've grown up like, oh, they're not real Alaskans down there. Yeah, of course, that's the way everybody is, right? But like,
Sure.
but I think
Friendly
living in-
competition, we'll call it that
correct,
way.
right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think to a certain extent, living in the interior is harder than
Sure,
living in
yeah.
Anchorage, right?
I mean,
We live here because we like it.
Yeah.
Right? That's the point. If you don't, you leave.
I've gotten that comment all the time traveling for my work, and they're like, oh, where are you from? Oh, Fairbanks. And they're like, oh, I couldn't live up there. Like,
Yeah,
and it's true, but there's also like areas of the state like Whittier, right? Like, how does anybody live in Whittier? It just rains on you all the time, like, and then you'll get like a really nice day.
right.
Or, if you don't like snow, don't live in Valdez because they get 25 feet a year, something like that.
My
Like,
brother lives in Wasilla and dude, he's always like, I couldn't live in Anchorage. And like, we'll go down and visit him and it just howls wind for like weeks straight.
Yeah.
The whole time we're there, you can't even be outside. And I'm just like,
yeah.
dude, this is like no quality of life. What the heck,
What
man?
was that 2 years ago? There was like this
Oh, that place got
huge
tore up.
windstorms and like roofs were falling off. And I'm
Mhm.
like, this is some Midwest stuff right here.
Dude, and
Like,
then
this
their
is-
snowfall this year
Oh yeah,
was like, I think it was like historical.
it was.
I mean, it was,
yeah, record setting.
dude, I mean, I don't know that Fairbanks is that rough. Well, we'll keep that under our hat, but
Well, I think it's mostly the
It's-
cold weather and the darkness.
Yeah, the negative 50s and your truck not wanting to start. And
you know, and you
yeah.
like, I always find it fascinating too how those guys like I get really intrigued by like those guys will bear bait and some of the ways they do things differently, and they're fishing, and you'll see on some of these pages different forums and stuff. They're asking like where to fish pike, and like some of this stuff is just so like easily attainable for us, and then they're trying to figure out how to do it, and then we drive 8 hours to go salmon fishing, right? It's just so it's funny, the trade-offs. It's very entertaining.
I've known a few of those guys to like, and I know there's a chunk of them that will come up to like hit the 40-mile caribou.
Oh yeah,
there's a bunch of them.
I run into them every year I've been up there.
But it seems like the majority of people that live down there may have been to Fairbanks once, and that was enough for them. And why would they make that drive? There's nothing up there to do.
Right. Yeah.
I got a buddy that every year he's like, "What are the caribou doing?" And I'm like, "Dude, that's not just like throw a rock down the street, man. Like I don't really know what they're doing." He's like, "So funny. I think this year we finally established like, dude, if you have some time, can you take a drive and like report back?" And I'm like, "Dude, that's not that close to my house."
Yeah.
It's like you want me to go do like a recon mission for him. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know. Like
the whole, I don't know. This is like, you live here, you expect to drive a ways.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you're doing. You expect to drive.
Yeah.
You live down there.
Yeah.
The mentality about driving is like, is so different.
You might go down to the peninsula.
And I realize, I'm not saying that's every way everybody is. I realize there's people that live that way down there too. It's just, I've known a lot of people down there, right? I actually drive down there every year, at least once a year.
Yeah.
For a men's meeting, and then there's a good chunk of men there that like, why would they can't even fathom like a reason to make the drive to Fairbanks,
right? Well, and
because it's so long, it's just such a long drive. I'm like, what do you mean it's a long drive? Like at max, it's like what, 7 hours?
So I was talking to a buddy of mine. So I've got a lot of buddies down that way. A lot of people I've worked with over the years, and a lot of people that I work with currently. And one guy I was talking to that I used to work with. And he said one of his frustrations, he was up here doing some projects in Fairbanks area. And he said one of his frustrations with coming up here this far is it is a very far drive. I mean, it's a full day's travel, respectfully. And I was kind of grilling him a little bit. I'm like, because he was a big hunter guy. I'm like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, why do you like living in Anchorage? Like, there's so many people down there, like compared to here. Like, why wouldn't you want to live somewhere like here? He's like, there is a lot of people, but there's also a lot of access. Like, there's more trails. There's more areas to go. There's more places to spread out.
I've talked to a lot of guys about this.
Yeah. And he's like, here in Fairbanks, there's limited road. There's limited trails. There's limited. So yeah, there's less people, but they're all concentrated in these areas unless you have a plane or a boat or some of these other things that you can get away from people. He's like, if you're just trying to wheeler and road hunt, he's like, yeah, there's tons of access down there.
I've heard you can get out of the way quick down there.
Yeah. And I've never tried it, obviously, but like, because I have no reason to drive that far either. But
I've considered considering maybe, I don't think I'll have time. I'd have, because I would scout it before I did it, but actually going down to that part of the state to moose hunt this year.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of great moose hunting down there.
I was looking at me and Dalton were on our way actually to that meeting I was just referencing this year, and I was on my maps over there just like looking at stuff and looking through stuff, and I was like, hey, have you ever heard of such and such road? It goes way back in there and such, and all this stuff, and he goes, oh yeah, Remy's been back in there, and he calls Remy, and so I'm like, and so we're on the phone in the truck there, just going back and forth. I'm like, hey, so what about? And he's just like, yeah, you can do it. He gives me all the details. Yeah, there's a lot of moose in there. Yeah, there's sometimes a lot of people, but the further you go, the less people there are. And I'm like,
just like anywhere.
Okay, let's see. All right, so that's a long drive in the truck, and then a long drive on the 4-wheeler, and then
yeah,
and then you can't scout how many people are going to be there in the middle of summer, right? Like, oh, nobody's been in here. Well, it's because moose season hasn't happened yet.
Yeah,
but
I just give people in Anchorage a lot of crap because they have a Qdoba and we don't.
What's a Qdoba?
It's so good,
man.
There's that new one too. I can't remember. It's another kind of similar place.
I mentioned it on here before, but as this Alaskan Fairbanks kid, I don't know what most of this stuff is.
It's like you ever been to a Chipotle?
Nope.
Okay. Well, they're like a build your own burrito. It's like it's Subway for Mexican food.
Okay, that
It's
doesn't sound bad.
awesome. It's the best thing in the world, but I have to go all the way to Wasilla to get it, or Seattle. Like, they've got one in the Seattle airport.
That was a good way to explain it. I almost said Taco Bell on steroids, but that's not right.
That's not right.
No, that's not it.
No, Subway for Mexican.
Have
Yes.
you ever been to Taco John's?
Yes.
Never been to a
Yes,
Taco
I've been to a
John's?
Taco
Oh,
John's
where's that
before.
at?
So I've been to one in North Dakota.
Okay.
It's kind of like Taco Bell, but actually I think it's a lot better quality
Yeah.
of food in general.
There's so
Like,
many.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'll eat
There's
Taco
so
Bell,
many
but
different of those places down in the lower 48.
Dude.
It's Taco Bell.
But I was in
Taco
Bismarck, North Dakota.
Tico.
If you want to experience Fairbanks and lower 48, but flatter and more boring, go to Bismarck, North Dakota.
I had a buddy when we worked in Prudhoe. I remember we always, like, when we had time, we'd run south and we'd run down the Hall Road and fish from Prudhoe. And he's like, yeah, man, that's just like the Dakotas. I'm like, really? And because it's all flat up there and like grassy and
Mhm.
like tundra. He's like, this looks just like Dakota. Just, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, what's it like in Fairbanks? So I was like, trees. He's like, and like, he was just so blown away. He was like, it's not like this. And I'm like, no, man. No, it is like deep, dark boreal forest. And he's like, no way, man. Like, you don't want to see pictures. And
That's the last time I was up in Barrow in the summertime. Like, I was out way off on one of these roads just exploring, and I took a video, this big grassy field, and I was like, this looks like Kansas. Like, it's just flat, wide open, green grass.
Yeah.
Like,
You
a
know
couple
what-
geese in the background.
dude, you know
like-
what blew my mind that you're kind of reminding me of?
Mhm.
So when I went out to my buddy Condro's place in Kodiak, this last winter was the first time Ben and I are always rapping through Facebook and sharing hunting stories, and I love chatting him up. But I've never really, he'll send me a picture of a project he's working on. He's like building a sauna or something, and you kind of catch a little glimpse of the yard or whatever. It was such a crazy feeling. We landed there, and it reminded me so much of Big Bear Lake, California.
Really?
Kodiak
Yeah.
Island, if you blindfolded somebody, I am not kidding you, like the architecture,
Mm-hmm.
like the houses,
Yeah.
everything is so similar. And in a sense, like they're kind of their peak winter where it's like that real, like they get that sleety wet. That's
Mhm.
Big Bear is very much like that. And I remember taking some pictures like kind of just down the road and stuff. I mean, identical weather-wise to Big Bear.
Really?
Layout, like that same kind of terrain. It was kind of like feeling like I
Nice.
was at home a little
Nice.
bit, right? But with like cool stuff to do.
Yep.
Like you could carry a gun around.
And there's big bears there. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just can't stress that enough. It was, the similarities were just unreal.
That's cool.
I sent that, like his road, I sent that to a couple friends of mine, and they're like, are you home? And I was like, that's the answer I was looking for. That was the
Right.
response I was looking for.
Right.
Because it just, yep. But
Yeah.
so
No,
cool.
well, and that's you said it earlier, Mo. That's one of the best parts about Alaska. And I've known people, and I don't understand it, but like when they're like, "Oh, we went on this long road trip, and man, it was so boring." Well, that's not.
Why?
I'm like, what's boring? Like, you drive from Fairbanks to Anchorage. I mean, that you're going through whole different systems, different trees,
yeah.
different mountains, different everything. I mean, when you look at the different mountain ranges here in Alaska, they're all different. Whether they're shorter or taller or steeper or more sloped.
Mhm.
Like it's crazy that anybody can like go from way up north on the slope to like down to southeast and not just be astounded at the differences in terrain.
Dude,
and-
drive to
Dead horse.
Dead Horse. I mean, it is
Mhm.
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You won't even be the same person after
it's
that drive ever
amazing.
again.
You're right. Well, for one, if you can make it all the way up that road and back down by yourself,
Done that
Good
several
trek.
times.
yeah, oh yeah, I know lots of times.
That's
Yeah.
But it's like, and you can do that and be sane. And
Right.
But I don't know how you could. I mean, it's just it's so
well,
enjoyable.
that's what I mean. That's what I will. The beauty of it's enjoyable. I prefer to drive in the wintertime. It's a little slicker, but it ain't rough. You
Right.
can,
Dude, I make my wife angry and blow gas money to do that drive solo. Like,
There's not
I love that.
1 foot deep ruts in the mud.
oh, it's
me
the road
and James
construction
have
is
had
another
some
thing.
missions. Wow.
Brought back some memories.
One in particular.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like driving through like 2 feet of snow, but mud.
Right. Yeah.
You see my truck? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's covered in mud right now. Yeah, it's from.
Oh,
that road.
you want one little pro tip?
What's that?
When you live the life that we do and you go to take your truck to a car wash, don't be surprised if you develop a wobble afterwards. So the roll through car washes like splash and dash and whatnot. If you ever like get a wild hair and just decide you want to make your truck look fancy in the middle of a hunting season, what I experienced this earlier this week is because you're just kind of going through this thing, right? It'll wash off the mud and then all that mud will settle on one side of your rims.
Mm-hmm.
Low points.
And then you go out, it power blasts it with air, dries everything out, you leave, and then it unbalances your wheels.
You know what I've also discovered is when you take a pressure washer to your truck when it's been covered in mud and you clean it all up and you clean all that stuff out, sometimes you have wobbles that were developed that go away.
True. That's very true. But that's all, don't.
You remind me, I had a rock in my brakes.
Oh, that's the worst.
And dude, so like I pull out of my driveway backwards, just drive all the way to the top of my road. Cause I live all kind of off the beaten path a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Drive all the way to the top of the road, like waving at the neighbors going backwards. And then like, can't get it out, turn around, drive it backwards. Like the neighbors like looking at it, like, dude, is he okay? I finally get it out. I'm like, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, just keep that in mind. If you develop a wobble after washing your truck or anything like that, it's not a serious issue. Just pressure wash your rims. You'll get the rest of that mud out.
Just get on the highway and do 80 and just blow that out.
Right, exactly.
Tip: if you're going to drive that road, you may not get covered in mud. You may go up there. It may just be dusty.
Mm-hmm.
Bring something to wipe your windows down and your mirrors.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because if I've driven that road a dozen times in a row, hardly any mud.
Mm-hmm.
But then that 13th time, you hit the road construction right after the big rain or whatever, and then you'll literally like in a matter of about 5 minutes, your windows will go from being clear covered in mud.
Yeah,
just because
it's like your wipers can't even keep up with it.
Yeah. Especially if you're following somebody or something, and like bring some extra washer fluid.
Yeah,
like throwing that under the hood.
And a little pro tip, just while we're on the road things, when you're driving in the lower parts of the state where we're talking about fishing and stuff like that, when you get on those long straightaways in between the hills, don't gun it to 80 because there's probably going to be frost heaves. And if you are in a smaller vehicle, like a car, you are going to bottom out so hard.
Or launch.
You will catch air on those things. I can't tell you how many people I've seen just zoom past my work truck on those straightaways. And it's great. I get it. Like, there's a lot of roads here. We want to drive fast. But and then all of a sudden, you just see them blast those brakes. They're just, because the roads here are not smooth.
Well, and you got to know
at all, even the paved ones.
You got to learn how to spot them and all too, right? And there's areas of north of Coldfoot. There's a stretch of road north of Coldfoot that's probably the most beautiful blacktop in North America. It is flat and straight. Well, it's not necessarily straight, but it is flat. No frost heaves, no holes in it.
Why didn't you guys finish this?
And it's for like 20 miles or something. I mean, you can cruise it.
Yeah.
The speed limit of the road's 50. I've personally never done it, but you can cruise it at 80.
Nicely.
Yeah, comfortably. And
well, and there's a lot of spots in the state where you can do that. I mean, I've argued several times that there's, a lot of the roads up here you could drive. The speed limit could be 70 and you'd be fine. I don't think that'd be a bad thing, but just you got to watch, mud,
well,
frost
you got
heaves,
wildlife
cracks,
and
potholes.
Yeah,
wildlife is a big one.
And the other thing, another thing to consider is like when you have all this beauty, right? It's really pulling. It's not just your attention, but other people's attention, and that's how you get a lot of like head-ons. And
you get a lot of tourists that don't know what they're doing.
No one's looking at the road; they're looking at the beauty.
I cannot tell you how many times I've been just cruising down the road. I drive a lot for work too, in addition to the rest of my lifestyle, right? And there's somebody that spots a moose 50 yards off the road. It's not in danger, but they're tourists or they're new to the state or they just like moose a lot, and they're just blasting those brakes.
Dude, I had a guy just lock them up in front of me coming home from the bait this morning.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you doing? And then I could see this dark blotch, like 100 yards off to our left. It was a moose standing in a pond.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
dude, really? I mean, this dude just stepped on his brakes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah, no, it's something to consider. Keep pay attention to who's around you, because the truck behind you might be a lot bigger than you are. But anywho's, road safety is a big thing.
It is.
Like we talked about, all of this stuff is a long drive. Chitna's easily 6 hours away from Fairbanks. I mean, if you're going down to the peninsula, good night. That's a much longer drive there. Anywhere we go, it's a long drive, and anywhere you're going to go in Alaska is a long drive. So just be safe on the roads as much as you do on the water and anywhere else. Again, we just don't like anybody getting hurt. We want you to have fun. So, you gents got anything else as far as the fishing goes to present?
Did we want to get into the O'Brien Creek Trail stuff? Some of the,
yeah, we can close out with that.
There's not a lot to it, but
no. So I mean, I know that there was a lot of different talk about different projects and everything going on down there. As of right now, for anybody that's familiar with the area, the O'Brien Creek area, which a lot of people use to get back for fishing access into the canyon, is, as far as I know, closed. Correct?
I think it might be reopened. But
Is it reopened?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I know the announcement I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago I saw it. It was closed down.
Look that up, Mo.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah.
Bryan Creek, Copper River. Just give enough information because I'm sure there's a dozen.
Yeah.
3.
Yeah, there was a big announcement on Facebook about it being closed down. And,
I saw that.
It might have been closed down just for that part of the season. Maybe there was a plan to reopen it.
Well, I know that with some of the findings, they built some alternative
perfect.
alternate
Okay.
routes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some
Yep. All right. This as of June 5th, boardwalks have been built between O'Brien Creek and Eskilda Creek to allow traffic to bypass culturally sensitive areas.
Okay, perfect.
Follow trail signage, stand designated boardwalks built to accommodate trail users, including ATV riders.
All right, that's what I was excited to hear about, because it is an ATV trail primarily.
Yeah.
And essentially what happened is during some excavation, they discovered, as it states in the article there, cultural areas, so historical sites, and there's a lot of these all over the state. I mean, there are tons of areas that get discovered during construction projects and other things, and it's really a cool process. My wife was actually looking at working for a group for a little bit there, where that would be her whole job, was to basically look at areas that they're looking at doing construction and find these historical sites and just areas where things may have happened in the past. A lot of them are hunting camps, fishing camps, things like that, where you get like structural bases and you can find tools and things. It's super cool. She used to get boxes and boxes of stuff, and it's awesome. She was an archaeologist for a long time. But so they discovered some of these on the O'Brien Creek Trail, and I'm glad that they reopened it and built those boardwalks around there, because that's a great access area back there. So the biggest thing for this year in particular is, as with all kind of, you'd call it high traffic areas, there's parts of Alaska that were historically used for certain things, and when they discover areas that were high use in historical times, it's very important to the culture and the people in the area to understand what those were used for, find out more about their history and the groups of these people. I mean, it's a really cool setup. I mean, when I'm trying to find the words here, but like my wife worked for TCC for a long time in the archaeology department. And, the things that she would discover about like the things people would eat back in the day, based on findings at these archaeological sites was huge. And contamination is a big thing on any of these archaeological sites. And so, just having respect when you're down there. I mean, it's high traffic. You're going to be going back and forth. There's going to be a lot of people going back and forth. But like that said, following the signage, using the correct everything like that is going to be huge to kind of preserving what they're trying to achieve.
I think a big one
sites.
too is not diverting and leaving that stuff alone and having respect for those areas.
Sure,
because there's a lot of cultural sensitivity in some of the findings and stuff like that. And I think it's a big thing to note, is to just be respectful. You don't need to go digging and messing with that. And that'll definitely compromise our ease of travel.
Oh
And,
yeah, 100%. I mean,
that
that
can
is
be revoked
a,
without any argument.
that's a permit accessed area.
Yep.
So when you go down there to the trailhead, and I mean, there's a place where you pay your access fee because you are accessing private land at that point. So,
be respectful.
Yeah.
I mean,
yep, that's a huge thing. Honestly, anywhere in Alaska, but especially when, the people who have permitted access to this land for, subsistence permits and things like that, for people to be able to go harvest what they need from the land as well. Just be respectful.
Yep.
And I mean, that goes from anything we've talked about on this show, but especially in this year, particularly, just it's going to be different than the years prior that you've been down there if you use that trail a lot, and just make sure you're paying attention and respecting the people.
It's kind of like new. It's kind of just now kind of a thing. So it's got some freshness to it, a fresh feel to it. So just treat it as so. Be respectful. And
yep, absolutely. All righty. Well, folks, thank you so much for listening and hanging in there. Man, we did a good job with the length on this one. We got to quit saying they're going to be short when we got in there. We're like, we'll just swing in for a quick one.
No such.
We try, people. We try. But thank you for hanging in there and listening to this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it and learned a little bit. If you have any questions about what we talked about at all, make sure you go to thenorthernhunter.com, hit that contact button. That'll get an email directly to us. You can also reach out to either one of our socials. If you hit search at The Northern Hunter on either Facebook or Instagram, you will find us there. And you can send us a private message. We'll respond as quickly as we can. If you would like to look for some great gear options, we have some partners that have decided to work with us here at The Northern Hunter and help us grow and do more things. We have a bunch of links in the partners page on our website there with discount codes. We've got Stealthy Hunter, we've got 60-inch Club, we've got Hammer Bullets, Batum 907. If you're needing to refresh your stuff this year before the end of the season, make sure you're going in there, hitting those links, using those discount codes. That'll get you some really great gear and help us out along the way as well. We've also got our shop page there where you can buy some merch. You can get some logo hats. We've got some t-shirts and hoodies with different designs on them. Any of you guys that want to rock our logo and rock any of our designs, if you buy a piece, send us a picture, and we'd very much appreciate seeing that. And the last thing, too, is the only way this show grows is through you guys. So if you would be so kind as to rate and review this show. 5 stars is always best, and a written review goes a long way in helping other people understand what kind of information we cover here and what they can find. And if you have any friends that could use this information, feel free to share it with them. There's always a share button on either any of our social stuff or any of the platforms you're going to listen to a podcast on. Has the share button right there. Send it directly to a friend. That'll help us a lot too. But anyways, until next week, get out there, get after it, and good luck. We'll see you there.